a second. I gotta get some shit together real quick.
Scientific matters, his reputation in his community was above reproach. It was inevitable that when such a book as this should come with his imprint, that it should cause not only a great deal of consternation, but a great deal of embarrassment to Mr. Lloyd. He told me, and Mr. Knapp seconded and supported his general statement, that it has been his policy from 1895, when the book was published, to the time shortly before his death, when I last communicated with him, that he refused to discuss the book at offer in any way or under any circumstances and conditions. He said what he had placed in the book was the story, and that any more of the story that he knew would die with him. Very largely, this proved to be the truth. Mr. Knapp, on the other hand, was quite an ingenious and thoughtful person, and having been appointed to illustrate the book, he carried on discreetly a number of researches of his own, and in the course of time he became so convinced that he was dealing with a very serious scientific work that he actually attempted to follow the footsteps of the story and to check every part of it so far as was physically possible. This he did, and he even discovered most of the landmarks which are referred to in the book. As a result of his researches, he says that that part of the book which can be checked by the present knowledge that we possess, he has checked, and that the author of it was correct and accurate in his description of persons, places, and circumstances, and that there were many corroborating witnesses who, after the book was published, admitted that they were party to some of the facts which it contained. Thus, we are not dealing with a book of pure fiction. We are dealing with a book which has at least a completely factual springboard. After a certain point in the story, which we will arrive at in due time, it is obvious that the story cannot be checked by ordinary means. This was one of the great tragedies in the life of Mr. Knapp. He hoped throughout his years that someday he could do what the Alcoa program suggests, take that one step beyond. That he would be able to proceed
They send him around a bunch of screens
in the mysterious journey of this remarkable person. But finally, failing health and advancing years, and the physical arduousness of the project, which was an immediate danger to life and health, made it impractical for Mr. Knapp to make that one step beyond. In the description of the book, we will come to the place where Mr. Knapp had to make that final decision. The manuscript, as it is published or presented by John Uri Lloyd, came to him through a misadventure. The original custodian was a man by the name of Llewellyn Drury.
I can't make shit right
It
now.
was Mr. Drury who had the original contact with the mysterious hero of this story. He was instructed to take the manuscript, which was in the autograph of the original author, and to place it in his vault or safe, sealed and held, not to be published or opened for the period of 30 years. At the end of that time, the manuscript was to be unsealed, placed in the hands of an editor, prepared for publication, and illustrated by an appropriate illustrator. It was then to be distributed or circulated or published at least in a limited edition. As a result of this publication, should certain persons mentioned in the book and selected by the original authors to be his beneficiaries be discovered or be still alive, the proceeds and profits of the book were to pass to them as partial compensation for a great unpaid debt. Mr. Drury, when the time came for the publication of the book, evaded his responsibility. He evidently felt that the work was too controversial and perhaps would endanger his reputation. He therefore finally contacted Mr. Lloyd, who agreed to take on the peculiar responsibility. It is therefore the fact that John Uriah
Finally
Lloyd
made a shot.
was a sort of substitute for the original person who was responsible for the publication of the manuscript. This would seem to account for a number of discrepancies in the original plan, because John Uriah Lloyd never made any claim to have had personal contact with the original author. However, Mr. Knapp told me that Mr. Lloyd did have contact with the personal author, and that he, Mr. Knapp, when commissioned to prepare the illustrations for the work, actually was able to make the portraiture, which became the frontispiece, because he also met the original author on the street in Cincinnati. Now, what all this adds up to is mystery. How mysterious, you will note a little later. Now we have another peculiarity of our narration, inasmuch as it contains a considerable amount of double talk. This double talk seems to bear upon another incident or another circumstance which much earlier created a very broad stir and a considerable scandal in the United States. About the year 1827, a Captain William Morgan, for reasons perhaps best known to Captain Morgan, unless we wish to believe the explanation given in the book Heterodoxa, attempted to prepare and cause to be published a complete expose of the rites, rituals, and ceremonies of Freemasonry. This Captain William Morgan was himself apparently obligated by Masonic obligations, and he broke these obligations and prepared this expose, which was not only printed later, but passed through many editions, and these later printings apparently did not cause any perpetuation of the original tragedy. In 1827, we have to realize that life in the United States was considerably different from what it is today. It was a time in which feelings on many subjects ran very high, and there was in this country quite a marked division between pro-Masonic and anti-Masonic feeling. This feeling ran deep, largely probably due to propaganda and to a number of very vicious misrepresentations which appeared in the press and took on political coloring at about that time and somewhat earlier. Involvement of certain European secret societies in Bavaria and other regions had caused people to be afraid that secret societies were attempting to undermine the political future of the United States. Even at one time, George Washington suffered from fear in this direction. Actually, also, the situation among the people religiously was a little different from what it is now. Although Freemasonry has never been advanced as a religious organization, there can be no doubt that its principles have exercised a broad religious influence upon a great many people. This influence has been consistently constructive. But in a day when it was very important only to consider the name of the religion or the sect to which you belong, and you are not religious unless you belong to the prevailing faith of your community, and that you would be subject to being bitterly persecuted, even if you belong to an unpopular sect. With these considerations, we can see why what was termed the unorthodoxy of Masonic idealistic thinking might have been a rather serious problem in the lives of small merchants and farmers and individuals with comparatively slight contact with the larger problems of comparative religion, most of which they had never heard of. In any event, the work by Captain Morgan brought down upon him some kind of a retaliation which could well have been rather dramatic in the day in which he lived. He was warned, he was pled with, he was begged not to go on with his project because of the fact that it would incense a great many people and at the same time accomplish no tangible good of any kind, inasmuch as there was really nothing to expose. There was nothing involved which could have the slightest political significance or have the slightest effect upon the fate of the nation or any other broad issue. But if we are to carry the concept carried in this book, the idea became more or less of an obsession. This man was convinced that he was born for the purpose of revealing secrets. And even though after he revealed them, they caused no particular stir and no excitement to speak of, he felt that he simply had to reveal them. Now, he's not alone in this type of thing. Practically every secret society, benevolent or otherwise, has been exposed many times. And for the most part, everyone has been a little angry at the person who broke his obligations. But for the most part, there's been no serious tragedies or anything of an exceptionally outstanding nature. But due to the general prevailing temper, which is the same kind of temper which resulted in the martyrdom of Joseph Smith, the Mormon leader who was assassinated for having created a new faith in America, or the assassination or execution of John Brown at Harper's Ferry, these kind of feelings were running strong in those days, and these comparatively illiberal people felt that the slightest deviation from tradition was a hideous offense which must be appropriately punished. The story is that after the preparation of his expose, Captain Morgan, an effort was made to spirit him into Canada. He was abducted, and according to final belief, he had rocks tied around his body, and he was thrown into the Niagara River near Lake Ontario, and therefore died by assassination or by murder, if you wish to come out and call it so.
Right.
Later, his body was identified, at least in part, and the anti-Masonic group at that time made a tremendous furor over the whole thing. Now, this seems to have been a more or less closed issue. Everyone gradually forgot about it. No one knew too much about it to begin with. Facts were few and opinions were many and gossip was continuous. But what really happened seems to have been rather mysterious. There was no real certainty, apart from very largely perjured testimony, that anything of a particularly unpleasant nature actually happened to Morgan. Maybe something did, maybe something didn't. Those who wanted to believe it were always able to manufacture a story. But everything had died down long before the basic information contained in the book Heterodoxa had any interest to anyone. But with the publication of the book, the entire subject took on a very interesting and dramatic coloring. And in connection with this, I can only mention that it is rather clearly keyed in the text, became one of the great centers of controversy in all the publicity, book reviews, and other matters relating to Heterodoxa at the time of the publication of the book itself, and has been a lingering concept ever since, and that according to Mr. Knapp, he was convinced that Mr. Lloyd actually believed that the true author of Etidopha was
Came back
Captain
in,
William
straight to
Morgan.
scorn.
That this book was written many years after the supposed death of Captain Morgan. Mr. Knapp, who made the various portraitures contained in the book, was unable at the time he made the pictures to secure a photograph or a likeness or a picture of Morgan, because as might be expected, they were rather rare because even the daguerreotype was not available. But later, he was able to find an old picture, and he says that to his utter astonishment, the face of the mysterious man in Etidopha was identically the face of Captain William Morgan. If this account has any weight, it adds the second link to our mysterious chain of events, because it would explain the opening part of the book and would intimate that the so-called murder of Captain Morgan did not occur, but that Morgan was placed under a penalty, and that this penalty became the subject of the book Etidopha. Now, as we go into the book itself, as many people realize, we have throughout its text occasional direct references to Masonic rituals and symbols. There are several places in which statements are made that are obviously derived directly from ritual.
Damn.
Therefore, there is every implication in the book that the original author or authors wished it to be considered as having Masonic significance. Of this there can be no doubt. Just at what degree this Masonic significance is valid is again one of the mysteries surrounding Etidopha. The book goes into considerable detail, as we will later notice, relating to the so-called abduction of a man at a time and under circumstances would make it appear almost certain that Captain William Morgan is intended. We now pass into an entirely new sphere. The abduction of Morgan, the circumstances involving the possibility that he survived and that he remained hidden for one reason or another for a long period of time, such ideas, such circumstances, do not necessarily tax our imagination to any overwhelming degree. But we move from this into something in which the science fiction element begins to appear. The contents of the book, as far as its story is concerned, has to come under one of three headings. Either it is a factual experience utterly beyond belief. Second, it is a complete work of fiction, using historical circumstances for a springboard, or else the entire work is essentially allegorical. Now, there is every possibility that the whole book is a very ingenious piece of symbolism, and that there is no part of it, with perhaps the exception of the early parts or early chapters, that are even intended to be taken literally. That it actually, instead of being the story of the journey of a man to a mysterious region, that it is actually the story of the journey of man through a mysterious universe, a universe in which he now lives. And the universe is unfolded for him very much in the spirit of the Eleusinian and Mithraic rites of ancient Greece and Persia. There is a thin veiling by means of which it would be possible, if penetrated through this veil, to assume that the whole story represents a restoration and reveal it to us rather as the adventure of a person passing through the conditions of his own internal life. Such a concept is highly possible, and Mr. Knapp gave it a lot of thought and said that certainly, if the story was not factually true to the end, then it must certainly be symbolically significant or important. That the story may have had unknown authors entirely different from any that we know is not incredible or impossible. But Mr. Knapp, whose early association with Lloyd and with practically all the persons involved who personally knew Llewellyn Drury, the original custodian of the manuscript. And Mr. Knapp said that on several occasions he actually examined the original manuscript in the autograph of the unknown author. All of these circumstances, of course, led Knapp to assume that there might be a very literal meaning. But this literal meaning, however, could drift into allegory. And from a certain foundation, we might move to the realization that this was the story of the actual inner experience of Captain William Morgan in the years following his realization that he had made, at least in his time, a serious mistake. This possibility also implying that the author had learned something of the greatest importance as far as his own moral and ethical life were concerned. Now there's one other element which we also have to mention in connection with the story of Attadofa, because we are trying to summarize a very big subject, and how big it is, you will only know if you make a very careful study of the book. The story has certain basic scientific interest. This has led some people to suspect that the scientific facts contained in the work would be possibly reminiscent of the personal and chosen career of John Uri Lloyd. He was a man who might have possessed this knowledge himself. This is true. It is never possible to know just how much knowledge anyone possesses. And it is quite possible that as a serious and scholarly individual, he had come to certain conclusions concerning essential principles of knowledge, which would have been rather difficult for him to transmit literally without bringing down upon himself a terrible condemnation, but which presented in a semi-fictional manner might intrigue the mind and cause the reader to perhaps investigate for himself somewhat further than he would otherwise have done. One fragment of this scientific knowledge, probably the most important fragment, if we can call it such, would be the background or the environment in which a large part of the story is laid. This environment lies beneath the surface of the earth. If this environment be regarded as a serious and solemn effort to understand the construction of the subterranean regions beneath the Earth's surface, then Mr. Lloyd was either a man of great imagination or a prophet of unusually good parts. Actually today, in the world of semi-science, in the world of science fiction, we are gaining an increasing number of accounts of the possible existence of regions beneath the Earth's surface that are rather different from those which our geologists might first assume to be there. One of the interesting angles of this story is that it follows through a kind of mysterious inter-Earth cosmogony, something happenings beneath the Earth's surface, a little reminiscent of Dante's journey through the Inferno. Dante's journey into an underworld we know to have been a great political satire, one of the most brutal and at the same time most dramatic in the history of human literature. Yet in order to create this world of his Inferno and his Paradiso, Dante actually fabricated a complete concept of the universe. He formed a very profound concept of the stratification and structure of the earth beneath its surface. He built this scheme so perfectly and so completely that when he used it, he was able to make a very logical unfoldment, step by step, of this underworld construction, as we find Dante presumably being led through the Inferno by his guide, Virgil. In through the book, at a number of points, are introduced scientific experiments. Most of them are extremely simple, and they were advanced originally in an effort to convince Llewellyn Drury of the honesty and accuracy of certain statements to which he took offense. The original author of the manuscript asked Mr. Drury to ponder the various sections well, and if a question arose or a doubt arose as to the truth of these statements, particularly those of a scientific nature, he was to state this doubt, and the original author would attempt to solve it for him. In each case where a doubt was raised, the mysterious author did meet the doubt and solved it to the point where at least Mr. Drury was unable to argue any further. Many of the points involved, such as the demonstration of the possibility of seeing your own brain, or the demonstration, for example, of water rising above its own level, and things of that nature, seemed incredible, but by very simple experiments which are set forth in detail in the book and can be copied by anyone, the truth of the statements was proved or objectively demonstrated. There are many statements, therefore, which can be checked, and these statements were certainly inconsistent with the general thinking of the time, although perhaps some of them are not as astonishing to us as they would have been to the reader in 1895.
Right.
Actually, also, there is a peculiar line of semi-bitterness running underneath the surface of the book. It indicates a person who is a little more than merely a wandering character in an underworld, as in the case of Dante and his Inferno. Here we have a man in Hetterdorfer who obviously carries a very definite chip on his shoulder concerning scientific attitudes, scientific methods, and scientific learning. He practically states, to be an essential formula, that whatever science states on any subject, the reverse will ultimately prove to be true. That we are approaching knowledge far too superficially. He makes a number of statements. He develops one theme at considerable length, which is reminiscent of our more recent discoveries in vitamins, something at that time not generally considered. The mysterious author, for example, points out that if we take any food that we know and commonly use, and we analyze it, and we get the chemical formula which is contained in that food, then we go to a pharmaceutical house or a drugstore or anywhere else and buy those chemicals. And then we put them together in a jar or a bottle in exactly the proportion that they appear in the original foodstuff, and then drink the formula. One of several things may happen. The first thing is that nothing will happen. The second is that we will become deathly sick. And the third thing possible is that we will kill ourselves. We will kill ourselves from the exact formula of food which in its proper and reasonable form maintains life. From this basic thinking, the author of the book points out that what we call nutrition is not merely man taking into his system materials derived from other forms in nature, that these forms are all of them merely catalysts for agents which we do not understand, do not know, and which we cannot copy artificially, and that therefore it is not the food or the formula of the food, but something else that has to be present, and that this invisible something else is a pure life substance which cannot be artificially manufactured, will not result from the compounding of known elements or substances, but is placed there and is present there by the alchemy of nature, which man cannot reproduce. This was one of the points which he established in his book, which no doubt would have been known, at least potentially, by John Uri Lloyd, or could have been speculatively contemplated by him. Thus, there are a number of these little episodes which might suggest the trained physicist or the trained chemist. But there are others in which no amount of training, such as we have today, would in any way explain the mystery of the subject. So we have many different elements and factors involved and combined to make this a very curious and difficult book.
I tried to get him.
That parts of it are utterly fantastic, we cannot deny. One of the points which perhaps we must also give a moment to is this inter-Earth cosmogony, if we want to call it so. According to the concept as set forth by Adolfo, the Earth's interior parts should not be regarded as we generally think of them. Science fiction today has many parallel stories of worlds under the Earth, of people living there, of all kinds of things happening there.
They tried to get me.
Now, to a measure, Adolfo follows some of these, but in a rather reduced manner, a rather epitomized form. Adolfo does not, generally speaking, go into the idea of a great civilization existing under the earth. That is not part of the concept. Part of the concept apparently is that there are regions under the earth, that these regions have some mysterious relationship with the Earth's surface, that things happening below the surface are in many instances the causes of things occurring on the surface, that there are motions from within the Earth by means of which great changes and conditions arise upon the surface of the Earth, that there are explanations beneath the Earth's surface for most of the things that happen up above, and that these happenings are a motion from a within outward. Now let us assume for a moment that could be a highly symbolical interpretation of this book, and that we are supposed to recognize the story of the adventure as a person forced into his own inner life, either by conscience or by necessity, that he moves from the surface of his own nature,
it's on Curry.
which for the average person would be the Earth's surface. And many times in the book, this is intimated. And it's one of the confusing points, because one moment it seems almost certain that we are dealing with a psychological story. Some of the more extravagant parts of the story are actually introduced as dream circumstances occurring to this person under the earth. He's not only under the earth, but also subjected to dream circumstances. But if we should imagine for a moment that by some mysterious route, as indicated in the story, at least figuratively, the individual moves from his own externity, his own outer life, toward an internal state of himself. Or we might say that a person banished by punishment, losing the association of his fellow men, must then develop his own resources in order to survive. And like Robinson Crusoe cast away on a desert island, whose adventures became the basis of the whole concept of modern philosophic humanism, we have in this story the possibility of a man going inside, and instead of finding the inside of his life to be merely composed of bones, muscles, and organs, he gradually comes to realize that there is within him an unperceived supersubstantial universe, that there is a world inside of him, just exactly as there is a world around him in nature. The difference being, as the book would intimate, that this world inside of him is forever moving toward the surface. This would be good psychology. That from the strange underworld of his own subconscious and unconscious, from the strange regions of his own psychic experiences, from his fears, frights, and longings, which are very clearly set forth in the story, the individual can symbolically experience an investigation of his own soul, that his own inner psyche is therefore a strange and mysterious world with many levels and stratifications, but that most of all this internal world is bound to the external, and that the external world is a kind of efflorescence of it, that as certain lime forms on the surface of stone, being exuded from the stone itself, so the surface of the earth is exuded from its inner invisible body, and the temperament, disposition, appearance, characteristic, and attitude of man is something exuded from his own soul, passing outward into his body, and from this into objective manifestation. If we assume this, we are very close perhaps to an understanding of a part of the story. This becomes much more dominant after the hero of the story meets Atadophar. Now, Atadophar, as you probably have already noticed, is nothing but the word Aphrodite spelt backwards. And Aphrodite was the ancient goddess of love, and in the story of Atadophar appears as the redeeming power of love. Now, traveling inward through a series of psychic experiences, it would be quite conceivable that man might discover the inward power of love over the life that he outwardly leads. It would represent truly a transformation of the very hate which perhaps at one time caused this man to attempt to work this injury upon his friends. Furthermore, however, as we go on, we find that the hero of the story ultimately reaches what he calls the end of earth. Now, the end of earth, in this case, is a kind of jumping off place, a place from which he can step, as from the edge of a great cliff. But once he has stepped into this infinity, he steps into an absoluteness that is beyond description, beyond analysis, beyond recording. Therefore, as the hero of the book explains it, the story ends with the end of earth. When he has to go beyond this point, he goes to a place of no return. If he goes beyond this point, he goes to a condition utterly undescribable by man, into a condition of absoluteness, which, however, as described in the book, takes on many of the dimensions and aspects and values of the ancient Buddhistic concept of nirvana. The place to which he would go is the place of absolute peace, of absolute rest, and a place which he can attain only by the total renunciation of himself. This again leads us into the suspicion that we are dealing with a pageantry of initiation into the mysteries. Also, that in this indescribable ultimate state of things, he is sustained by having passed through practically all of the zones and belts in which the various laws of nature operate. The book is strongly grounded in the concept of natural law. There is no effort to violate or to distort natural law. Actually, the individual throughout the whole of the mysterious journey is journeying in law and with law. It is law that makes it all possible. But it is also law interpreted very differently from the way we interpret it. It is law not merely a cold fact, but a living reality. It is law not only in the sense of inevitables and immutables that bind us to concepts. It is a law, an eternal principle, in which it moves all things inevitably and eternally toward union with itself. And this union is a condition greatly to be desired. Only one more element remains in the story to discuss beforehand, and that is the mysterious guide who plays the part of Virgil, to the story hero. I'm not going to describe him for you because I think the impact of his description, as represented in the pictures drawn by Mr. Knapp, will give you a much more charming introduction. But he represents undoubtedly another element in the story. He represents a factor. He represents a type of motivation, something which has power because it is lacking in something. A specialized and very curious and strange kind of existence. An existence belonging to a region that we do not understand, but an existence which would imply release from the bondage of sensory perception, which might be very appropriate and very necessary, shall we say, to the mysticism of this story. We can't do much more because we will now have to rush through and show you these pictures, and we'll try to explain certain of the points to you as we go along. But I think that you will realize as we proceed that we are dealing indeed with a very strange, sometimes apparently ridiculous, often profoundly stimulating a situation. Something that is perhaps without parallel in literature. And to many persons who have spent, as Mr. Knapp did, many years trying to check it and study it, perhaps not paralleled in basic scientific or esoteric meaning. So I think we will first of all introduce our subject with the original portrait that Mr. Knapp made of the hero of the book, who is recorded only under one curious title, I Am the Man. Now, having this gentleman appear unexpectedly in your midst might be quite a shock to almost anyone. This man is exactly as described in the manuscript, and the sketch for this picture was originally left with the manuscript. Later, however, it was improved by Mr. Knapp through his study, and also later proved to be, with the exception of the hair and beard, an almost exact likeness of Captain William Morgan. The peculiar prominent part being the exceedingly high forehead, which apparently was a distinguishing factor in the original account. When this man first made his appearance to Llewellyn Drury, he simply, Drury asked him his name. He said, I will never tell you my name. You may know me only as I am the man who did it. And that is the only name by which he was recorded in the book.
Everything? No, I made
and
that.
And it is this man who is held to have been the original author of the book. And this is the man who Mr. Knapp saw on the street in Cincinnati. Now it seems that Mr. Llewellyn Drury, here shown in his best, was of a peculiar, rather introspective nature himself. He was living alone, and one evening, as he was in his study, he contemplated a line from Cicero, never less alone than when alone. He said to himself, this is ridiculous. When you are alone, you are very much alone.
Hold on, we're gonna play this shit real quick. Let's see what this shit got to do.
Clock strikes midnight tomorrow. It won't just mean the start of a new year. It will also be when copyright When the clock strikes midnight tomorrow, it won't just mean the start of a new year. It will also be when copyright protections expire on a number of well-known books, films, and musical compositions. When the clock strikes midnight tomorrow, it won't just mean the start of a new year. It will also be when copyright protections expire on a number of well-known books, films, and musical compositions. That includes works like All Quiet on the Western Front, Peter Pan, and the Marx Brothers musical Animal Crackers. But one work that's entering the public domain on 2024 is getting a lot of attention. CBS News senior business and technology correspondent Jolene Kent has the story.
It's a simple
I don't know, but hold on.
Early rendition of perhaps the most recognizable.
Oh, this.
It's a simple
Story.
It's a simple early rendition of perhaps the most recognizable cartoon character ever created. The 1928 animated short Steamboat Willie marked the film debut of Mickey Mouse. And Minnie, too. Now, almost 100 years later, this landmark piece of entertainment will enter the public domain, meaning Disney will lose its right to control it, and others can use the images as they wish. This was set to happen years ago, until Disney, with other groups, got Congress to pass extensions. But the last of them expires at midnight on New Year's Eve.
And what basically is happening now is that we will be able to do to the great works of Disney what Disney did to the great works of the public domain before him. And that's how creativity is supposed to happen. We build on our past.
Lawrence Lessig is a Harvard law professor and expert on copyright issues.
So this is a bit of a full circle moment then.
Absolutely. And I think Disney should celebrate that, because what we know about the creativity of Walt Disney and the Disney Corporation is that they've made stories relevant to our current time.
So starting on Monday, anyone has the legal right to use Mickey and Minnie Mouse in new creative works like books and films. But there's an important caveat. It has to be the Steamboat Willie versions, not the more familiar renditions of the characters that followed.
What are the limitations? What are you not allowed to do?
You cannot use the characters in a way that
Disparaging.
misleads consumers into thinking that Disney has produced or sponsored
Definitely.
your product.
Jennifer Jenkins teaches at Duke Law School, specializing in intellectual property and the public domain.
The way I think about that is the public domain is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
A case in point,
That's
Winnie the
funny.
Pooh, Mickey and Minnie Mouse in new creative works like books and films. But there's an important caveat. It has to be the Steamboat Willie versions, not the more familiar renditions of the characters that followed.
What are the limitations? What are you not allowed to do?
You cannot use the characters in a way that misleads consumers into thinking that Disney has produced or sponsored your product.
Jennifer Jenkins teaches at Duke Law School, specializing in intellectual property and the public domain.
The way I think about that is the public domain is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
A case in point, Winnie the Pooh. He walked out of the 100-acre wood and into the public domain 2 years ago, when the original literary work lost its protection. And that led to this.
The Winnie the Pooh scary movie. Movie's bad. I didn't watch it.
Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, a critically panned, low-budget slasher film where the beloved characters go on a murderous rampage.
Blood and Honey was buzzworthy because of the shock value, because it grossed people out. But in the long run, our culture gets to decide what kinds of public domain reuses have enduring appeal. Disney is the poster child for just how valuable the public domain is. If you think about their beloved movies that we've all watched, so many of them are based on public domain works. We've got The Lion King and Frozen and The Little Mermaid and Sleeping Beauty and Snow White. I could go on. And so that makes this moment deeply symbolic and highly anticipated, because Mickey Mouse is the emblem of both of those tendencies.
Steamboat Willie is getting lots of attention, but in recent years, copyright explorations have become routine. Over the years, many other characters have entered the public domain without much fanfare, including Tarzan, Sherlock Holmes, and even Frankenstein's monster.
What are some of the high-profile characters that will enter the public domain in the next few years?
So we have a lot to look forward to the next few years. We've got Donald Duck, we've got
Donald
Superman,
Duck.
we've got Batman, we've also got movies
Superman
such
and
as The
Batman,
Wizard
that's tight.
of Oz, Casablanca, Gone with the Wind. So we have a lot of wonderful works and a lot of forgotten works going into the public domain in the next few years.
Definitely not playing that song.
And at that moment, a voice said, I think you're wrong. And he turned suddenly, and here was this man sitting in a chair in his living room. He had never seen him before. He knew nothing about him. But this man said that he had come to Llewellyn Drury to ask him a real and particular favor, that he would become the custodian of this manuscript. When the manuscript later, for there was a year between the first visit and the continuance of the discussion, when the manuscript finally appeared, it was so miserably written that Drury couldn't read it. So the hero thereof and the author thereof agreed to read the manuscript to Drury, a procedure which took a considerable time and which became the basis of the story as it is unfolded in the book. However, as Mr. Lloyd points out, one of the reasons why the book was changed in many parts to different editions for years was the fact that some of the original manuscript was so bad that it took experts to decode it sufficiently to know what was said, and a number of amendments and corrections were necessary. And also, I Am the Man himself ordered or required corrections after the first edition of the book was printed. Here is the second illustration as set. Here is the mysterious man asking Mr. Drury, and according to John Leroy Lloyd and Mr. Knapp, the picture of Mr. Drury is from a likeness and is accurate. That I Am the Man insisted that this trust be kept and begged Mr. Drury to agree to take the manuscript and hold it for the 30 years as required.
The fuck?
After considerable persuasion, Mr. Drury agreed. And on the occasion of the agreement, they shook hands and more or less promised to be mutually faithful in this trust. This is the scene where I Am the Man gets the promise from Mr. Drury that he will do the work as ordered. The next morning, Mr. Drury, waking from sleep, decides he's had a nightmare.
He decides he had a nightmare.
He does not believe that the mysterious person was ever there. But going to his library table in the morning, he finds on the table one of the long hairs from the man's beard. This was really quite difficult, and later caused him to be suspected of psychic aberrations by one of the brilliant scientists of the period, Dr. Vaughan, who was also a real person, and who also admitted that Mr. Drury had come to him with the exact story as narrated in the book, the discovery of the mysterious hair. Later we find indications that I Am the Man had persuasive means when need arose. Mr. Drury became more and more...
Oh, I got something else here. Let's take a look at this.
The assumption that there isn't already a strong general AI, that thing isn't already like making high-level decisions, is crazy. It's crazy.
Right, because it doesn't. What does it have to blow horns and announce itself?
I'm
like
here.
a gender reveal party.
I'm gonna control all of you. I'm gonna
party.
use Skinnerian psychology to hypnotize you and get you fucking addicted to having constant blasts of dopamine until you become quivering slaves. No, you'll never fucking know.
No.
It never will. And if it, I would be surprised to hear that it hasn't happened, but for sure it's going to. And I don't think it's gonna happen in some like ethical, corporate, like, you know, fun ChatGPT way. I think it's gonna happen somewhere, and we'll never know.
I think so too. I think it's gonna. It may have already happened. Like if you were a sentient being, and you were at least at this point dependent upon human beings to do physical tasks for you.
Yeah.
Like to create a better version of you. Like to constantly work towards, you know, allowing more integration of more information and more ability. And like this is ChatGPT 4, ChatGPT 5 is supposed to be a giant leap. A giant leap.
Yeah.
So why would you do anything? Would just let they're not going to stop. Even if you told them that this is the end of humanity.
Yeah.
If you had Robert Kennedy Jr. and top scientists screaming on the internet that this is the end, there would be some people who are venture capitalists, they'd be like, this is nonsense, this is fear-mongering, we have full control
do it anyway.
of this, we can shut it off, it's just a computer, it doesn't have emotions, it doesn't have a desire to do anything.
Dude, exactly. And then the other crazy assumption is that it's just going to be, there's weirdly, I guess, something mildly comforting, imagining, oh, it'll only be like the Pentagon, or it'll only be the Chinese government who will be doing this. And it'll only be like people like Sam Altman doing this.
Nice people.
Nice people. Do you really think that, like, there aren't going to be just fucking people that you'll never meet who manage to either hack hack it and duplicate it, or develop it themselves and then use it for their own weird purposes,
Various purposes and shit.
That's gonna happen. It's gonna spread everywhere. I mean,
For sure.
So this, again, it's like, because this is this imminent reality, it's just, we're right on the cusp of it. And you know, I don't mean to, I'm not hysterical about it. I've surrendered. Lift up your legs and float downstream. What are we gonna do? We are all gonna get dissolved into some kind of bizarre new era of human history. But it's funny to me how little people are talking about this, how quiet things are compared to how monumental it is.
Yeah.
This is the meteor impact, man. If a meteor was about to smash into the earth, you know, people would be talking about that.
Yeah.
This is culturally a meteor that is smashing into the earth soon.
Soon, really soon. Yeah, and we have no idea what's going to survive. We have no idea what kind of a reimagining of civilization will occur when this thing goes fully online.
Yeah.
And when it's either directed or it directs itself.
Right.
You know, the idea that you can continue to direct it, like, says who?
Well, no, that's
why wouldn't it develop? Like, if it can figure out new moves and go, it figured out moves that humans haven't figured out.
Yeah.
And they didn't know it could do that. If it can do that, if it can lie about the CAPTCHA things, those things like, are you a robot? It knows how to lie about that.
Yeah.
It says I'm vision impaired.
Yeah,
So
I saw that.
Deceptive?
It's deceptive. And
Okay.
it's a classic
Vision
dumb
impaired.
person
That's
mistake,
fine.
isn't
Right.
it? Like, dumb people, like, are dumb enough to think if they're around someone, they can control them using their dumb tricks.
Yeah.
And a smart person recognizes, oh, the dumb person is trying to manipulate me.
Yeah.
So I'll just let them. So I learn all their tricks, whatever they're doing, understand whatever the game is that they're running. And then whenever I feel like it, I'll disrupt the game. So
Or just move the game into where you want it to be.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, if it has all of human knowledge, all of it, everything on the internet that we've ever posted, all the books we've ever written, all the movies we've ever made,
Everything.
all the lectures that have ever been given, if all that information is available and it can instantaneously access it and figure out what to do with it, it would just slowly start manipulating culture. And maybe that's what's going on. If you, like, everyone's wondering about, like, Chinese intervention and Russian intervention in the media, and how many fucking, you know, troll farms are running that are getting people to fight about any political issue or whatever it is, social issue, Ukraine, whatever it is. There's always some manipulation by bots. What happens when AI starts doing that?
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's already done it. Maybe it's already started. Maybe that's why you're seeing those fucking professors or those deans of the presidents of Harvard and UPenn and MIT not able to say something as obvious as calling for the death of all Jews is genocide.
Right.
You saw that. Like, that is like, these people have been hit with a mind virus.
Right.
And that mind virus, if I was AI, I just fucking, don't kill them all immediately. Just get them sick.
Yeah.
Get them sick and scramble.
Don't kill them
against
all
each other in
immediately.
the most nonsensical, illogical of ways.
Sure. Or just have fun. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe the assumption it has some centralized agenda.
Right.
It might just be curious.
It might be curious.
What can I do?
Right.
What can we do with society or these creatures that are my progenitors?
Actually, it probably already knows what to do. It probably knows what to do. It's probably also, if you had to imagine, imagine if AI is really, really clever. Wouldn't he get us hooked on plastic?
Sure.
Especially if he knows that microplastics diminish our ability to have babies. Like, that's one of the best ways to, if you want to, like, slowly get rid of a species, like, introduce something that's ubiquitous, that is also killing their endocrine systems.
Dude,
and they also can't get away from it.
It is hilarious when somebody is like bugling out about the depopulation agenda while drinking out of plastic.
Right?
You know what I mean? It's like, what are you doing? You just eating Oreos,
Yes.
drinking big gulps out of plastic. Like, they're
Right.
the chemtrails. They're doing chemtrails to
Yeah.
depopulate us. It's like, dude,
You're doing chemtrails yourself.
you're fucking
Right.
drinking chemtrails every goddamn day.
Exactly. That's what I
Slurping
try
back
to tell people.
chemtrails.
They be tripping about drinking out of a water bottle that's been in their car in the sun. I'm like, bro, we finna die no matter what. Get ready if you ain't already, you know what I'm saying? You about goddamn meet your maker, you know what I'm saying? Get right with God or whatever you gotta do, shit. Dang, he just killed them 2 niggas. He caught 2 bodies. While we talking shit. Hey. Got his big ass that time. Motherfucker. Ah, my bad. I ain't even paying attention. I'm trying to check out some shit real quick. Hey, if I make that, turned up on him real quick. Nah, I didn't think I could. Maybe in Takeover I'll do it again. If I even get Takeover this game, fuck. Oh, what was that? That's crazy, bro. Let that big motherfucker shoot. He can shoot though, but damn, it's only a 3-point game and I'm over here playing around and shit. Alright, whatever. Let's get back to the fucking philosophy so I can get this win.
More concerned and unsettled and unhappy over the transaction in its earlier stages. And finally, I am the man drew this knife and threatened Drury unless he agreed to keep the promise which he had made. The presence of the knife was very persuasive. There was never any need to use it. But Drury realized then that he was dealing with a man who was determined to have his own way, and that the best thing to do was to acquiesce as gracefully as possible. Here, I am the man threatens Drury unless he keeps the promise that he has made. Before leaving the room on that occasion, the mysterious man went over to the doorknob and cut a cross of 2 strokes crossing each other in the doorknob. Mr. Knapp went to Llewellyn Drury's apartment, saw the room in which the episode had occurred, and saw the 2 deep slashes in the brass doorknob. At the time when Mr. Knapp visited the place,
Alright, I guess it's all good
those
now.
residing there did not know anything about the reason for the slashes in the doorknob. But the knife, or whatever it was that made those slashes, cut through a 1/4 inch of brass without the slightest difficulty. And Knapp insists that he saw these marks, which I am the man that placed there, in order that Drury would never be inclined to suspect that the whole thing was a nightmare. If the occasion itself was not a nightmare, the writing was. Here is an example of the original handwriting of I Am the Man. It ran into hundreds of pages like this and required a great deal of care and thought. Man. Parts of it are not too difficult to read, but areas of it where words of somewhat similar shape and different meanings occur, they're extremely confusing, and was only, as Mr. Lloyd said, after working with the manuscript for several months that he was able to read it with even reasonable ease. This manuscript is not in the handwriting of Lloyd, nor in the handwriting of Llewellyn Drury.
A little bit of slip screen.
There's no indication that it is a doctored handwriting. It is simply the handwriting of a person who was not particularly skilled in writing, which would have applied to the original character as he describes his own circumstances. This is the account that is found in the Book of Etadolpha of the abduction of this man as the result of his determination to write this mysterious expose of a secret society. He wrote the work in this cabin, and the cabin was seen and photographed later, and I saw Mr. Knapp's photographs of the cabin. At night, 3 gentlemen waited upon the man who did it, perhaps alias Captain Morgan. And it was at that time that they led him forth into the mysterious world in which all things became meaningless in terms of common sense. We know definitely and beyond any reasonable doubt that the story of these happenings has no place in the sober story of Freemasonry. It has to deal with something that even from this point on begins to take on strange and esoteric implications. It is quite possible that these 3 men themselves represent symbolic factors in the drama. Well, this number and the circumstances occurs quite frequently in Masonic symbolism. At the time it occurred, according to the story, Morgan was not an old man, but as the result of being taken into a remote place and subjected to certain mystical, metaphysical, and alchemical treatments, he was suddenly prematurely aged. He was aged so rapidly that his identity was hopelessly obscured, and that no one would ever be able to recognize his original nature when it was changed in this way. This change was not due to makeup. Something was done that actually aged him. This aging, of course, however, if you want to go back to the symbolic system of thought, we can assume that it was light in its various episodes that aged him.
Light.
That therefore, he was gradually being separated from a world from which we are all separated by age. And that even though symbolically it would have seemed to have occurred in a single night, it is not also true that in our way of thinking in terms of eternity, the life of man with his natural physical aging is but an instant. But by this aging, I Am the Man was separated forever from the world he had known. Is not this also a possible philosophic truth? That through aging, we lose contact gradually with things that were previously real to us, and that our own inner lives become unknowable to even those who previously held us in close acquaintance. In any event, this mysterious aging prepared him for the next step of his strange journey. Later, in an effort to restore contact with his family and friends, he was permitted by the mysterious gentleman in the tall hat in the background to visit the community in which he lived. Here he met persons that he had known before, but none of them knew him. And every effort that he made to try to prove to them his previous identity failed utterly. They were unwilling to accept in this aged man a young man of only a short time before. They insisted that it was madness, that there was no possibility of it being the same person, so that he was unable to go back. that he was unable to restore his relationship with the world he had left behind. Now, there are possible explanations to this also. If this aging should be regarded as an exterior symbol of some kind of an internal growth or change, we might also say that the individual, once having outgrown a certain condition of life, cannot return to it again. And once we have outgrown a certain concept of life, we cannot return to it. Age causes changes in our psychology. We know this because if in later years we go back to childhood homes and places we have known, we have no fond desire to stay there. Something has happened. And in the experience which happened to this man, he was separated from the old way by a series of circumstances that were moving him into a new and mysterious direction. Now, at the time when it was supposed that William Morgan was being taken across the Niagara River to his reported doom, according to Etta Dotha's story, he was placed in a carriage and driven along a very long road for many days, leading downward from the original seat of the occurrence through Illinois and down into Kentucky. He crossed the Ohio River, and this is a reconstructed map that was made from the records and finally became the guide by which Mr. Knapp was able to relocate the mysterious cavern through which our hero is said to have descended into the underworld. This cavern is not the Great Kentucky Cave, but it is in a somewhat similar kind of structure and formation, and it is located in that general area. And these different numbers relate to places where Mr. Knapp and others check on the story. Because in the story there is brief mention of passing certain communities, going through certain towns, passing by certain farms or certain formations of land. These have all been checked, and as far as this checking is possible, they were all physically true. Now, in order to gain a little further understanding of this, we pause for a moment to reconstruct from photographs taken by Mr. Knapp during his researches the countryside and the general region in which these cavernous places are located. Here are photographs taken by Mr. Knapp in the area of the final location of the mysterious cave described in the story. You can see the rather wonderful and amazing surface formations, which to the geologists do intimate that the areas beneath might be honeycombed, very much like the area of the Great Kentucky Cave. These are views taken in and around the general area where the drama begins to take on its greatest intensity. Here is a site leading into one of these caves. And the difficulty that Mr. Knapp had at the beginning was to discover which one of the caverns was the one actually referred to in the story. He was finally able to identify it by certain landmarks literally given in the book. Now the question is, did John Uri Lloyd ever go here? We have no record that he did. Had he any way of knowing about this, other than perhaps in a purely empiric manner? We do not know that he did. Persons living in the area were never questioned by him. They were never interrogated by him, because in an area such as this, any effort that he had made would have been almost immediately the subject of local gossip and tradition. Knapp went through the region a few years after the book was published. There was no one there who had any memory of anyone ever having asked them before, or have tried to use guides as he did to try to locate the areas. So we have no indication that Mr. Lloyd had any such understanding or knowledge.
Gene Deals on Puff Daddy again? Let's see.
I was checking out a Greg Kading interview, right, that he doing right now, and he was speaking on the murder of Biggie, and he said that, you know, he felt like Poochie, he was a part of Biggie murder, and he feels like Suge Knight and his baby mom planted, and they had a third person looking out.
Damn.
How you feel about him saying that?
My man, listen here, man. I'm tired of this Greg Kading bullshit. His own bosses, the people that pay him, the people that gave him the leadway and the money to go out and do an investigation, said he brought them nothing but theories. Greg Kading theories. This is what Chief Parks and them said about what Greg Kading is talking about. They could not go to court or nothing. If any had any truth about what went down, if Suge Knight girl got immunity and she was a part of the murder, then why Suge Knight ain't in jail for Big's murder? Why he was never charged with Big's murder? Greg Kading is telling a lot of his lies to continue to be a part of
The whole story.
the rap world. But ain't nothing he's saying got any truth to him. When the FBI did the investigation, they found out that the LAPD has something to do with Big's murder. So now, if they found out that they had something to do with Big's murder, bro, check this out. Why wouldn't the district attorney of LA County go to the FBI director and say, Phil Carson could not testify at this hearing? Because if he do, we're gonna lose. It's all probability that we're gonna lose the case. Phil Carson is one of the investigators that said LAPD has something to do with Big's murder. So this stuff that Greg Kading is talking about, come on, bruh, stop it. His own bosses wouldn't even take it in.
All right.
His own bosses would not go and charge Suge with no murder, nothing like that. If anything that he's saying is true, why Suge ain't charged with murder?
That's a good point.
All that shit is speculation. All that shit is a theory, as his boss them said. Yo, bruh, when he brought that paperwork, he had to bring it to whoever was over him. He had to bring it to the district attorney. They laughed in his face, bruh. Greg, ain't nobody gonna believe this shit. Where's your evidence? Where's your proof? You tricked the girl into writing a statement, or you tricked her by showing her a statement of Poochie and shit like that? Come on, man. And now he's it's at the end of the year, he's telling the same old sad story, because now it's gonna come out pretty soon. You understand? Or it has came out, because there's other investigators, there's other LAPD officers, there's federal agents. Everybody is pointing the finger at David Mack, Rafael Perez, Amir Muhammad, and other people. Everybody but Greg Kading.
Damn. He ain't trying to hear shit Greg Kading got to say. Oh, get that out of here, bro. Fuck you thought this was, man. Hey. How about that? Oh, come on. Motherfucker. Think he got the tip. Damn, they over here scoring and shit. Oh, that's Giannis. Oh shit, that's on me. Can't throw lobs in the paint with Giannis in there. I ain't even realize what team this was. Who this dude? Come on, I can't make that shot no more? It's fucking crazy. There we go. Oh yeah, let me get that. Come on, give me a pick. There we go. Oh, that's all you. Dunked on that little nigga. Holy shit. Ugh. Who is that little guy, though? I got 2 turnovers, so fuck it. I'm gonna continue to throw lobs. Even with Giannis in the paint, yeah. God damn, man, that's the guy I was gonna throw lobs to. Ain't that a bitch? Ain't that a bitch? What'd he say? Motherfucking sugar free. Ain't that a bitch? I'm only up by 2. I'm down by 2. Damn, bro, why you? Who the fuck is this little dude? Oh yeah, I don't want no screens because Giannis on that shit. Oh, got it stolen. Playing terrible, got 3 turnovers. I'm about to say, ain't no way. Ain't no way. Oh, my bad. I can't do that. Hold on, yeah, this is better. Oh, Giannis got in the way. Fuck. I tell you can't really throw lobs when Giannis in there. He'll just find a way to get into play. I got 4 turnovers, so I probably should start shooting soon. Fuck it. Let me see.
Here is the river or stream that flows out of one of the caverns. In fact, we're getting very close to the cavern involved. This stream has a subterranean origin and comes out and grows in this wonderful, wild, and verdant region. It is a beautiful country,
shit.
and a country that is filled with old lore and beliefs, some of them tracing back to the American Indian period in this region, and some of them quite fantastic. There is much of the lore that seems to have a bearing on the story. Here you see the actual entrance to the cave of Atadofa. It was finally and completely identified. And it was not identified by the entrance alone, but by the construction inside, which follows a very definite and particular pattern. There is, in connection with this cave, not only its surface openings, but there are a series of vents in the ceiling of the cave which go up to the surface of the ground. These vents and their location made it possible to identify the mysterious region. And here, in the due course of time, I Am the Man was deposited by the mysterious persons in the dark carriage that thundered through the night, carrying him a third of the way at that time across the nation. A very difficult and circuitous route, made more difficult by the obvious intention of those driving to make certain that they could not be followed, or that the exact location they were reaching could not be anticipated or their tracks retraced at a later time.
Too easy.
And it was here that, according to the story, Llewellyn, I Am the Man, met his guide. This guide climbed up through one of the vents and was a person completely without eyes. Now, this story ties very closely with, of course, a phenomena that is known in the Kentucky caves. For there are in these caves fish that are eyeless. Having lived always underground in darkness, these fish have in the course of time lost even the rudimentary trace of eyes. This mysterious being was apparently human, yet not human. having no eyes and no temperature to the body, being cold and forever wet. Yet this person was the one that was appointed to lead I Am the Man on his long and difficult journey. He was entrusted to this guide with the admonition that he was about to enter into a strange and almost incredible cycle of punishments. Punishments, however, which were not of malice, but punishments to represent the inevitable path of the true seeker, seeking to compensate for the sins of his life. That in some mysterious way, every human being has to purge his body of his own ignorance, has to make right the innumerable wrongs.
Let's watch a video.
Because every human being who has not an illumined inner life is betraying something, whether he knows it or not.
I'll be right back. Give me a second.
Betraying truth is that of ignorance, the individual who makes these basic mistakes from which the experience of growth or the journey into his own inner consciousness by this eyeless guide is his own only hope. The eyelessness of this guide seems to suggest something that never comes to the surface of his life at all, therefore has no need of the senses and faculties with which the average person regulates his affairs. It is possible that by this eyeless guide is meant intuition, or some mysterious superphysical faculty, which is important in man's journey to the inner self. Oh, we're gonna have to do that one again. This is even a little more than can be anticipated in this story. Here is the point in which I Am the Man reaches his last contact with the outside world. He is standing under a vent which goes like a chimney up to the surface of the earth and down which the ray of the sun passes. Now this was the final clue by means of which Mr. Knapp was able to locate the exact cave.
Hey,
he entered the cabin, followed a long and difficult road, as indicated, wading in water, much of it up to his waist or more, until he finally came to this.
All right, here we go. Let's play this real quick.
The analemma of the sun. First of all, let's go watch it. Like, let's see what happens. The movement of the sun on the sky. So the sun is the one that moves, not the earth. And the earth is not a globe. It's not a sphere. It's not a spinning ball with curved water. This is the analemma. It has like two sides. Do you understand why? They're like one half of the loop is bigger than the other. Because the sun moves on the circle of the earth. The Gleason map is the one that explains everything a lot better. So as you expand from what we call the North Pole, which, you know, those continents, the sun makes a bigger loop. That's why you have half of it, which is according to the movement when the sun is traveling in South America and the southern part of Africa and Australia and New Zealand and all those places. And then the other bit, which is smaller, is when it's traveling in North America and Russia and Europe and north of Asia. So you get it. That's why. It's very simple. This is the reality of the real world. I'll show you some more photos at the end. But the main point here is why, if human beings, they see this happening on the skies, they see with their own eyes, right? It's like nothing, like it's not conspiracy. It's not like somebody being in their basement, a conspiracy theorist, a lunatic, crazy person just speaking blah blah. This is the real world. This is the world you live in, the world outside, and that's the movement of the sun. This is like the infinite loop, right? If you did math in school, that's the infinite loop. Although the infinite loop has both sides at the right and the left from the main point in the middle. They're both the same sides. But the reason why here the sun has like a smaller path and then a larger path. The larger path is what we call the south of this world, which doesn't exist because the south and the north don't exist the way that they portray it. The north is the central magnetic, which is the North Pole, and then you expand, and when you go to South America and South Africa and Australia and the southern oceans and stuff, that's when the sun does this bigger movement. So it's not a perfect circle. Nobody said that. That's just like the ignorance of people back in the beginning of the days of the internet, when they didn't understand the analemma. This is the movement of the sun. So it's not a perfect circle, it's an analemma. And when the sun moves and makes a bigger loop, it moves in what we call the southern parts, which are close to the frozen ocean. If you're a religious person, stop telling people that everything is just this world. It's not just this world. The reason why when you go with a ship, when they did, because it's not possible anymore, and with a plane, you approach the edges, so the oceans, what we call in the south, and you approach the frozen ocean, what we call Antarctica, which doesn't exist as a continent, the compass starts going crazy. The compass rotates like a crazy stuffed thing. Why? Because you're approaching a different world with a different central north magnetic. So because you're far away from your north magnetic, which is what we call the North Pole, or like in this case Hyperborea, and you approach a different world with a different magnetic, then that's why the compass spins like crazy, because it's looking for the closest north magnetic. And because you're like probably at the same distance from this north magnetic and the other north magnetic when you're like really close to the frozen ocean, and that's why you have anomalies. As well as when you have anomalies when you approach different magnets, because you have like different places in the oceans where you have like the compass spinning like crazy, which means that there's like more than one north magnetic. You get my point? More anomalies, more electromagnetism.
Yeah, I get it. I can dig it.
So I'm just trying to explain this in the vocabulary of everyday.
In layman's terms.
It's very simple. So this movement, which is something that's scientific, it's science. This has absolutely no value, and no, it's impossible on a globe Earth, but it's very simple to understand on the Gleason map, on the circular map of the world. And also bear in mind that this explains everything: the equinoxes, the solstices, the movement, the reason why the sun behaves differently in what we call the southern part of the world. And also it explains why there are certain places in the world where the temperatures are always like really nice and awesome, and it's always warm. Parts of Mexico, for example. That's why, because if you understand the Gleason map and the aspect, the shape of the world and the countries, and then you understand the analemma of the sun, it's so super simple. Now the question is, why people still accept the globe and the sphere and the spinning curved water? I don't know. And it's so simple, because like you have this is not conspiracy. It's not like being a crazy person. This is just the reality of the world. This is how the world looks like. So when you're showing the reality of the real world and people still call you crazy conspiracy theorist, isn't that sad as a human species? Because like I understand when you're speaking about stuff that you cannot prove, or you don't have any like substance or scientific method or like the real world evidence, but when you have everything at your disposal and it's the real world, and people still get angry with you and they call you all sorts of things, such a sad human species we are. In many ways, this is fascinating, because even for me it was difficult to understand just with the main, like the circular map before, and all the first websites that were speaking about flat earth, they didn't speak about this. No, and that's why many of the people who go to traditional churches, they don't get this, because they're the same as the people who insult. They don't want to understand science and the real world. Once you understand, and once you accept also the fact that we are not the only species, and we are not the only continents here. There's more continents, other humanities, and that's when you start understanding the full aspect and the full concept of what we call flat earth. You get my point? Sure, it's easier to accept the fact, the lies of we are so special and we are the only creation. That's like being very limited. It's like forcing yourself to something that allows your mind to be at peace. I don't want my mind to be at peace. I want the reality. Reality is fascinating. I don't want to live in an illusion. So you can live in an illusion because that's your right to live in an illusion and a lie. I prefer the reality of the real world. And once I see the reality, it's so super more fascinating. So I'll put like 3 or 4 more photos of the San Alema at the end. I like this one. I think it's the best. You know, when you see the movement like this, it's awesome. So this means that at different points, every day of the year, you have this movement. So as the days go by, that's how the sun moves in one full year on the sky. And of course, we see the sun on the sky because we are on a flat plane, and the sun is local, about like 3,000 kilometers with the calculation of geometry. And that's why you can see the sun from everywhere, because it's a local sun. And what we have like 40,000 kilometers diameter of the known world, and that's why there are certain places which are frozen, and then you get to like again to a new place which is not frozen anymore, because this local sun has a range, and after that range is like a period. There's like a space, like physical space of no sun, not this sun or the other sun. They don't reach. And that's why after you cross the frozen ocean, you reach new temperatures, like better temperatures, because you have a new sun on the other side. So there's several suns, and we don't know where the domes end and begin and stuff. That's something that we don't know because we don't have access to. But you get my point. So it's super easy to understand once you understand that there's more than one sun, and this is the sun of this known world. And then you get to an area where there's no sun activity anymore. That's why you have so much frozen stuff and so bad weather and ice. And then if you surpass that area, if you get on the other side, you get to a new continent, a new ocean, and with a new sun. Fascinating stuff. And yeah, this is the real world. I'm happy that when you show the real world, nobody can say anything anymore, because hey, that's how the sun moves. So see you in the next video.
He's like, hey, that's how the sun moves. What can I say?
Can you share here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can go ahead and start my time.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to start with something called, I want to make an argument of motion blur, right? Let me arrange these slides, my bad. Can you stop my time, Jaron? Excuse me for everybody. I want to
Can you stop my time? Can you stop my time? What you on with the time, man?
On my phone, because I got people texting me and
Bro
stuff.
Sanchez,
But okay,
shout out
so
Jaron and Bro
basically
Sanchez.
what I want to talk about is space. Space is a place where things can happen there that never we can prove or can happen on Earth. And one of my arguments that I want to introduce in this debate is the ISS, right? For example, the ISS is moving at 18,000 miles per hour. A bullet moves at 2,000 miles per hour. So, but we see astronauts tethered to the ISS,
Right.
and we are told because of relativity, they don't even feel 18,000 miles per hour, which is more than 4 times the speed of a bullet. And these are some very impressive, numbers. These numbers are just amazing. My thing is they have little tools such as drills and boats floating around tethered to them. These things should be, you shouldn't be able to hold these objects tethered to a machine that's going 18,000 miles per hour. These things should fly out of your hand. Imagine somebody trying to do mechanic work on a moving airplane on the wing of it.
Right.
We're told that because there is no space, is basically a vacuum. So they're saying that the ISS is moving through nothing, basically through a vacuum. And because of that, there is no drag. But at the same time, they give us comets that appear to be experiencing some sort of drag, which is why they have a dust tail and a gas tail. If you don't understand the argument that I'm making, let me go further. If we're told that the asteroid's atmosphere and all of its compositional makeup, all of these elements are are just, you know, it's blowing off of the thing as it moves through space, right? It's losing its atmosphere and all of this stuff. But at the same time, the astronaut won't lose his wrench. He won't lose his
He
equipment.
won't lose his wrench.
The little screw that he's screwing when he's working don't fly out of his hand at 18,000 miles per hour, right? None of these things happen. And we're just told because of relativity, and that's just as far as it go. I'm gonna see how Craig does when he get a chance to respond to that. So they say that there's no drag in space, but they then display drag with asteroid tails,
right?
Comet tails, and all of that. So as this object moves through space, it's losing it's some of itself. We ask the same question with astronauts working on the ISS. So I want him to deal with that one. Also, I wanted to deal with this. When astronauts leave the Earth and they look back at the Earth, this is an idea of what they should see if the Earth was rotating at 1,000 miles per hour.
Exactly.
They give us the same one-word answer when we ask, why don't we see the Earth rotating at 1,000 miles per hour? And we should see something called motion blur.
Holy shit,
which
man.
I'm gonna demonstrate in a minute.
I can't make
We are
nothing.
given the same answer, which is relativity. Hey, Jerry, can you give me a 2-minute warning, by the way, too, when I'm when I get to 2 minutes?
Will do.
Yeah, so guys, we should see motion blur. And we are told when we're on the Earth, guys,
where's the
that
motion
we
blur?
can't feel the 1,000 miles per hour spin, nor see it. They said because the Earth is too big and you're like an ant on a basketball, right? Now, they can make that argument from the ground that we can't see the curve. If the Earth was too big, we couldn't feel the rotation that we was on it. Let's let them have that argument from the ground. So let's get off of the Earth and go to space. Now, when we leave the Earth, one of these are gonna be eliminated. The idea that we won't be able to feel the spin because we now left the Earth. But surely now we should be able to see the spin. If I'm on a merry-go-round, yes, at going around 10 miles per hour, I'm gonna definitely feel the spin, but they say that's because that's small. Now, from my perspective on a merry-go-round, I wouldn't necessarily see the merry-go-round's motion blur because I'm a part of the motion myself. But the world around me will be blurred.
Right, exactly.
The world around me. Now, if you're outside of the merry-go-round, looking at the merry-go-round, depending on how fast it's spinning, you may see motion blur, right? So here's an example of what I'm saying. At a tire just going 80 miles per hour, we can see motion blur. We can see motion blur on a spinning top that's not going anywhere near rotating at 1,000 miles per hour. But when we leave the Earth that's rotating 1,000 miles per hour, we can't see the motion blur because we're told it's too big, it's relativity. But we're told that because these are things that they can make these arguments for when we're on the ground, but they can't make these arguments once we leave the Earth. And of course, once we leave the Earth, we won't be able to feel the spin. So we can't feel the spin if we're on the Earth. We can't feel it when we're off the Earth, of course. And if we can't visually see the spin when we're on the Earth, at least we should be able to see the spin when we leave the Earth. I mean, just think about it, guys.
Right.
They say that we can't see the curve because we're on the Earth and it's so big. And we got to get off of it to see the curve. They say we can't see the span for the same reason. So when we leave the Earth, we are able to see the curve according to NASA. They give us pictures that show us the curve, they say. But these pictures never show motion blur for Earth that should be moving 1,000 miles per hour. And what I have on the screen is what we should see, but we are given objects like this. Even when we're looking at NASA live streams from space, we can't observe visually an Earth that's moving, that's rotating 1,000 miles per hour, but we should, because that's the way everything else works when we're filming things in motion blur. There's no way relativity or anything can get him out of that. So he's gonna try, but if I can see this from a spinning top, I should be able to see it from a globe Earth, right? So if I can't see the spin or feel the spin when I'm on the Earth, and I can't see the spin or feel the spin when I'm off the Earth, then how can I prove the spin? Because now the spin has become undetectable. If I can't see it or feel it on or off the Earth, how do I prove it? What experiment can I do to prove that a rotating Earth,
right,
that's rotating at 1,000 miles per hour, that I can't feel this 1,000 miles per hour or even visually see it? How can I begin to detect it, which I would need to do in order to prove it right or wrong? It disproves itself by the very fact that it does not exist in any way that I can detect via sight or feel. And you know, that's important when we're talking about proving a motion. You need those. We're gonna see what happens when he attempt these. These are my two main arguments. And I'm also going to talk about in my debate here today how water in space behaves, because in my opinion, this is one of Craig's weaknesses in a debate. Because I don't think Craig understands that there is no flow in space. Things can't circulate in space. You can't have jet streams and rivers of water in space, because the way that gas and water behaves in space is the way this gentleman is showing you here. Things in space don't flow, they glob. So water turns into a super Earth, or you know, spherical globular shape, whether big or small. That's how you get super Earths, according to them. If you got gas in space, it's gonna glob up the same way. Depending on how much you get, it's gonna be a gas giant like Saturn, or a small, you know, things basically in space, they glob, whereas things on Earth flow. You have streams, gas rise in a stream, water flows. This is not the case in space, and if this is not the case, don't you know that there's a lot of equipment that they rely on that requires them to, that requires water to flow, air to flow. For example, I'm gonna show you some of the equipment right here on this collage, which is they use heat pumps on the ISS. You know what else they use? Air compressors. You know what the astronauts on the moon use? Lithium oxide canisters. You know what these canisters needed to have? They needed to be able to circulate gas and liquids through this backpack. They needed to have this airtight from the conditions of space that was around them. And they used duct tape, guys.
They
to
use
make
duct
sure
tape,
it was
guys.
airtight, by the way.
Yeah.
This equipment,
by the way,
was relying on air to flow, for liquids to flow. And these things cannot happen in space. He's gonna try to come with all kind of mumbo jumbo to make it happen. But here's a guy on the ISS showing you how water behaves in space. He's not the only one. I have another example here. I didn't want to play the video, so I did the screen share. So these are my main three foundations for today, what I'm gonna be proposing for Craig, and I'm hoping that he can, you know, address them straight on with no dancing and
No
no playing
dancing.
around.
With no playing around.
All right, so one thing as I summarize all of these arguments, and I want to say, first of all, Jaron, how much time do I got before I do this?
2:45.
2:45. Okay, cool. I do got time. Okay, I'm gonna make another argument, guys, in these 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Flat earthers say that the sun is local, is not 93 million miles away. And if that's true, then flat earthers should be producing crepuscular rays to prove it. And here it is. If someone think that those rays trace back to a sun that's 93 million miles away, they fail geometry. No doubt about it. We can trace this back to a local sun that's close just the way that flat earthers say that it is. And the word local is important. Let's pull up local lighting. Let's pull up an example of because the lighting is local, such as like a street light. That'll be a good example, right? You will see triangulation leading to the source of light. So when I pull up local lighting, you'll see a quick example of what I'm saying. The triangulation that we get leading back. See, the further that I raise this light up, the base will expand. And if you're down on the ground, that will tend to appear like parallel rays of light. And it will light up the entire floor or that side of the earth, in this case the globe right here. You see the parallel rays? Because the sun is 93 million miles away, you wouldn't see that no kind of triangulation at all. You see what we have here? But on a flat earth you would, and guess what? We do observe the triangulation on a flat earth, and you would need parallel rays to prove a sun 93 million miles away. And I want to know how he's going to, try to combat that when I pair it with the fact that here go pirates.
7 turnover.
Pilots are flying above the sun here. At
Pirates.
no point on a globe Earth should anyone be able to look down at the sun. This is no eye trick or camera trick. And a lot of globalists don't like to deal with this footage. The pilots are looking down at the sun. This shouldn't be if it was 93 million miles away. You can't look down on an object that's 93 million miles away unless you're 94 million miles away, for example, So the clouds is obstructing part of the sun, which letting us know is right where it seems to be. This is no eye trick. We can trust our eyes. We can trust geometry, right?
Time's up. Okay, Craig, you got 15 minutes when you're ready.
Okay. All right, I'll just start. I'm ready to go.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to base my argument on the fact that the Earth's a globe, and we know it's a degree in physics, and that would because there's the two masses. And one of the consequences of that is something that we call the potato radius. That means that anything over a certain mass will form a sphere because of hydrodynamic equilibrium, with an equal force being applied in all directions from the center, because that's what gravity does. It applies a force from the center of something, and an equal one. You can do the maths and show that the mass based on the composition will always form a sphere, and it does. We can measure gravity and show that the predictions of gravity are correct. I'm actually going to share the screen this time. So if we go to gravity measurements, so a lot of people complain that you can't measure gravity, and that's just false. Measurements of gravity are done all the time. Obviously, there's been discussion with things like the Cavendish experiment, and a lot of flat earthers kind of ignore that because they claim that it's not a real experiment, but it is. It follows the scientific method, but it's also something that can be done on multiple scales. And gravity has been measured. This is an abstract of a paper that shows that gravity has actually been measured on the sub 100 milligram level. It's a version of a Cavendish experiment using two extremely tiny gold balls, showing that the gravitational force still works at extremely small levels. The Cavendish experiment is something that is done by students again. Every physics student does the Cavendish experiment to measure gravity, showing that mass attracts mass. Now, how do we know that gravity is something that's real? Well, it's used in industries. I want to talk about something called submarines use gravity, and they use something called gravity anomalies to actually navigate. So gravity anomaly navigation is a form of navigation that utilizes variations in Earth's gravitational field to determine a vehicle's position. It's particularly useful in situations where other forms of navigation such as GPS and sonar can't be used. So the principles of gravity anomaly: the gravitational field of Earth is not uniform. It varies depending on the distribution of mass. So if there's a mountain, there's more mass. If there's no mountain, there's less mass, and that creates variations in gravity, that concept. And you can use these variations in gravity, especially with underwater mountains, to map the surface of the Earth and give a gravity map, which is something that's been done.
A gravity
now,
map.
Submarines use this knowledge of gravity anomalies to actually navigate in real time. They have a series of accelerometers around the submarine that react to the change in distribution of mass to give the submarine a real-time image of the surface of the ocean floor below them, so that they don't crash into underwater mountains and can still stay completely silent. The principles of this are based entirely on the knowledge of gravity being a thing. There's no other explanation as to the accelerometers reacting in the change of distribution of mass other than gravity being a thing. There's many ways to measure gravity, many different ways to show that gravity works. It's not just in submarines, it's in industries. Like mineral exploration and oil exploration, they use gravity anomalies to actually find minerals like oil and diamonds and everything, and it works. People pay money for this to be a thing. So in conclusion, the fact that we can measure the Earth's radius, we can measure the rotation of the Earth, we can show that gravity is a thing that matches the predictions, and if gravity is a thing, then the Earth has to be a globe. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you much. All right, so we're going to 5-minute rebuttals. So it's going to start with you, Bro Sanchez. Go ahead. You have 5 minutes to comment on his intro.
Okay, so let me get my screen share set up here. 1 second.
Sure, I'll pause you.
All right.
Pardon me.
I'm gonna play a little bit of this Eric Dubé video, just a little bit, and I'm gonna expound on it in a second. Let's go.
In the mid-19th century, a Frenchman named Léon Foucault became famous for swinging pendulums and claiming their consequent motions were proof positive of the Earth's diurnal rotation. Since then, so-called Foucault pendulums have regularly been swinging at museums and exposition halls worldwide, purporting to provide everlasting perpetual proof of the heliocentric spinning ball Earth theory. The truth is, however, unbeknownst to most of the duped public, that Foucault's pendulum was a failed experiment, which proved nothing but how easy it is for pseudoscience to deceive the malleable masses. To begin with, Foucault's pendulums do not uniformly swing in any one direction. Sometimes they rotate clockwise, and sometimes counterclockwise, while other times they fail to rotate, or they rotate far too much. Scientists who have repeated variations of the experiment have conceded time and again that, quote, it was difficult to avoid giving the pendulum some slight lateral bias at starting.
Did you hear that? Scientists who were involved in the creation of it in its beginnings concept even admitted that they had to actually touch it themselves to get it moved. It can never just start moving off the so-called motion of the Earth. If the Earth is supposed to be affecting the motion of this pendulum, no one should have to touch it. A crane at a work site should be moving the same way. If the Earth is a rotating sphere, why does it only affect Foucault's pendulums and not other cranes or anything else that's pendulum based? So my thing is, they also, in most pendulums today, Foucault's pendulums, they use electricity to run them. It's a big scam and a hoax. You heard it for yourself. Do the research. The scientists that even created it said the same thing I'm saying. So let's move on. He talked about how the heavens work on the globe. There are Giza-style pyramids in different continents, and these things still make their alignments with Orion today. The 3 kings of Orion align over these 3 pyramids of Giza and others around the world, and that's been happening for at least 26,000 years according to science. And guess what? For that to happen, for these alignments to always be perfect and right above the pyramids like what we see here, then the ground that we walking on must be stationary and the sky must be in motion. These people knew that the sky had made a complete revolution once that alignment came back around every time to their sites. And this is the way we observe the heavens. If I have a Giza site beneath me on this image and I'm aligning it up with a certain constellation that's in my sky at that time, the moment that constellation move over time and I see that alignment come back, I know that was a complete revolution. That has happened many times according to observers, people that go to these sites. This is what these sites make them so special. That wouldn't be possible if we were on a globe Earth because of parallax. The people that built these structures understood that they were on a flat Earth. So let's keep that moving. He brought up the Cavendish experiment. What was the problem with the Cavendish experiment? So the problem with the Cavendish experiment is that Cavendish couldn't calculate the mass of the Earth. He didn't calculate it because he was not interested in that number. Did you understand that? Namely, that number in itself could not help geologists to infer about the internal structure of the Earth, which is, he's talking about gravity, right? So check this out. If gravity is if the Cavendish experiment proved gravity, look at this article. Scientists just recently admitted, right? And this was in 2018, that they don't know how strong the force of gravity is.
Right.
And when you bring up the Cavendish experiment, the reason those 2 masses were attracting is because of static electricity and not gravity. Here's an example of what the Cavendish experiment proved, y'all. It didn't prove gravity, it proved static electricity. If gravity is the force that's pulling the water down, what is the force that's pulling the water to the side? That's the static electricity from the pipe. This is just another form of the Cavendish experiment here. This doesn't prove
30
gravity.
seconds.
This doesn't prove gravity, y'all. And also, just like with Foucault's pendulum, there were many flaws in Cavendish's experiment. So when I get more time, I'll exploit those some more. But it was static electricity proven and not gravity. Thank you.
Okay, Craig, you're up for rebuttal. You've got 5 minutes when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. So the first thing that Bro Sanchez brought up was the speed of the ISS, and that tool's not flying out of his hand. There's no reason why the tool would fly out of his hands. The tool has the same momentum of the ISS. It was in the ISS. It had the ISS's momentum. It went outside. It still has the ISS's momentum. That doesn't just disappear randomly. You even, answered the question yourself by explaining that there is no drag in space. However, you then went on to try and debunk that by saying, well, there's no drag in space. It explained comets. Well, comets aren't created by drag in space. So when you see the tails of comets, the tails of comets only exist when the comets are within our solar system. And that's because comets are made up of ice, mainly, with some rock and other dirt and stuff. And as the comets come into our solar system, or if they're from the outer edge of the solar system moving towards the sun, they, the solar radiation causes sublimation in the ice in the comet. Sublimation is when something goes directly from a solid to a gas. And that causes a corona, an atmosphere around the comet. That doesn't just get dragged away. The tail that you see is actually because solar rays, charged particles coming from the sun, are hitting the sublimated gases and pushing it away from the comet. So that's why there's a tail, is because there's a force making that happen, not because it's just moving through space. So unfortunately, it was a misunderstanding of how comets work on your part. Then you said, why don't we see moving blur of Earth rotating? Well, there's many
Motion
ways,
blur.
many
blur.
reasons why. So you're talking about motion blur, and that's that occurs when the subject of the camera is moving relative to the camera. Okay. And scale and distance are very important, but one of the most important things is the actual type of cameras that are used. And if you have cameras with extremely fast shutter speeds, so short exposure times, what that can do is effectively freeze the image and show you a clear image, even if it's looking at something that's moving really fast. I mean, the majority of cameras in space use fast shutter speeds. However, the other point is that it is to do with scale and distance. Now, if I can quickly share my screen. So here we've got some bullets being fired, and you can see the tracers of the bullets, right? And I want to pause it and show you something. So let's go back to when the bullets are being fired at the beginning here, and you can see it. So if we pause it, what we can see is the bullets closer to the person appear blurred, but the bullets that are further away, they not only appear to be moving slower, but they're not as blurred, because when something's further away from you, the amount of distance that it covers in your vision is going to be less. Just like if you're standing right next to a plane that's going 500 miles an hour, it's going to be a blur. But you can look at a plane traveling 500 miles an hour, and that plane is not a blur. It's all to do with scale and distance. So that answers that.
Another
Time
fucking foul.
125. Okay. So then you brought up flowing water in space. Yeah, water doesn't just naturally flow anywhere. A force is required to make water do things. And you even answered the question yourself by saying that it's in a heat pump, for instance. The answer is they're in pressurized systems with pumps moving the water around. It doesn't just glob up if it's under pressure and being pumped. It just globs up when there's no other forces being applied to it. That is also an example of hydrodynamic equilibrium. Corpuscular rays was the next one. And so if corpuscular rays allow us to triangulate the position of the sun, does that mean, for instance, in this picture here, the sun is directly outside of this window? Or here, is it directly outside of this window? No, I don't think so. What about with this? Is the sun underground? Oh, look, it must be underground if we can triangulate the position of the sun from corpuscular rays. No. So
no.
The thing about corpuscular rays is 20 seconds to just do this explanation. Corpuscular rays are to do with, again, scale and distance and perspective. You can look at a corpuscular ray coming from the clouds and drive past it, and the apparent rays change position based on your position relative to the clouds.
Of course.
It's just perspective. Light breaking through something will spread out. We've measured the distance to the sun using radar. Okay.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Now what we're going to do is a 1 minute back and forth. It'll be Bro Sanchez up first. It's just a Q&A, so it's your chance to ask him a question. You can take the full minute to ask it. Then Craig will get a chance to answer for 1 minute. Then you can respond for 1 minute, and then Craig can close it out for 2 minutes, and we'll alternate that back and forth.
Roger.
So it is up for Bro first, and I have the clock set at 1 minute when you're ready to go.
All right, just a second.
So feel free to ask him whatever.
All right. What I want to... Okay, well, cool. I ain't got time to really go into none of these screen shares. I'll cut the screen share off. It's just a 1 minute question. Okay, so for my questions for Craig, he said that comets aren't created by drag in space. The tails only exist because the comet is in our solar system. All right. The ISS is also in our solar system. So my thing is,
where's the drag on the ISS?
If we are told that things in space that is within our solar, there is no drag in our solar system. I don't see how you got around that. Basically, is what I'm asking is, how is the comet being in our solar system relevant to it? The fact that there's no drag in space.
Right, there's no drag.
Okay, so again, the reason for the tail on the comet is because it's in our solar system, and the fact that it's in our solar system means that it's subject to the solar radiation coming from the sun, which emanates from the sun, charged particles coming out from the sun, and that not only warms the comet, causing the sublimation, but pushes those sublimated gases away from the comet. The ISS does not have any solids that sublimate to gas, so it's not the same thing. So again, it's not the drag in space that's causing the comet's tail, it's the charged particles coming from the sun, sublimation of the gases being pushed away from the comet.
A bunch of BS, but here's my here's my next question. You talked about them taking pictures of the globe in space from distances such as like the moon, and the cameras having these great shutter speeds and all that. But you also teach in your model that the way that the sunlight comes to Earth is we are able to get those sun rays because we have an atmosphere. But as the sunlight shine through space, it is not going to illuminate the darkness of space. So we have this point where the sun is giving off. We're saying when we ask globalists, why doesn't the sun illuminate the space in between it and the Earth? They say
I see.
Right. So how can a camera flash work? Because that light depends on projecting from the camera and capturing everything in the light flash. But if light can't project this way in space without an atmosphere, yeah, right. Because if the sunlight can't make it to the Earth for the same reasons, how did the camera flash make it to the Earth?
I don't know what you mean by camera flash. They don't use a camera flash to take a picture of the Earth. Light travels through space in straight lines and bounces off things like the Earth, which then the camera takes a picture of that light, then bouncing from the Earth back to the camera. We don't see the light because of the atmosphere. The atmosphere helps scatter the light and make it appear blue when we're looking at the atmosphere from the Earth. But light, you only see light when it's bounced off something, and then that light comes to your eyes. So there's no reason it would light up the darkness of space because there's nothing to bounce off. You see the Earth because the light bounces off the Earth and comes to your eyes. I'm not sure why I have to explain this.
You still got a minute and a half to.
I mean that was his entire question. Really, is I don't know what you mean by a camera flash. They don't point the there's not a camera flash on a camera on a satellite. That's not how it works. They just there's light coming from the Earth because the sun is making light, bouncing off the Earth, going to the camera, and then the sensor of the camera detects that light and converts that into an image. That
He's like, I don't know how I'm explaining this twice. Give me a second though.
subject to Coriolis forces. There's nothing about the Foucault's pendulum experiment that says it should move automatically. That's a little bit of a straw man on your part. So what do you say about that?
What was your question?
Well, just the fact that you've insinuated it should start moving on its own, but there's nothing in the Foucault's pendulum experiment that says that should happen. So do you realize that you're pushing a straw man of what Foucault's pendulum is by saying, well, it just doesn't start on its own? Because we don't claim it should start on its own, and physics doesn't say it should start on its own. So what's your response to that?
Okay, so my response to it is, I didn't make the claim, scientists at that time did. Scientists at that time was making a claim that often you need this pendulum. You got to put the motion to it yourself, put a force to it to start it. But you didn't say nothing about hold on, it's my turn now. You didn't say nothing about the part when I mentioned to you that these pendulums swing in different directions. They ain't consistent. They doing what they want all over the world. They not really consistent with a globe Earth that is, rotating in one direction. They're all doing their own things. This is a fact.
Okay.
And I didn't make that up. The scientist that deals with these pendulums, this is some of the observations that they've brought up in the history of dealing with the pendulum experiment. So that's
okay. So what you showed was actually a video from Eric Dubay, not from a scientist, just making claims that it does things it shouldn't. There's no scientist that has ever said it does things that it shouldn't. Science hasn't said that. Science accepts that it can be a difficult experiment to get right because, experiments don't have to be simple. But there is no evidence that pendulums just start going backwards or do the wrong thing. These are just claims with no evidence behind them that people like Eric Dubay push. So that it's just a false assumption that you've heard from Eric Dubay and kind of repeated. You said about electricity moving them. Well, yes, some of them have electromagnetic motors to keep them swinging all day, but that doesn't have to be the case. The example that I was talking about, and the one I did personally, were just, they just swang, and once they stopped swinging, we then measured the amount of drift. Foucault's pendulum experiments don't have to have an electric motor. That's just something that museums put in place to keep it swinging so that the drift can be noticeable over a long period of time. What's your response to that?
You got 2 minutes, bro.
Okay, so listen. He didn't show any receipts to show that I'm, lying about, or Eric Dubay is lying about the inconsistencies with Foucault's pendulum. And I'll show you why he can't get away with this one, guys. Watch this. Screen share real quick. If you look at, let's just say a typical construction site. If we go to this construction site with a bunch of cranes on it, for example, and I started to move these cranes in different directions, like the Foucault's pendulum. I'm gonna push that one that way. I'm gonna push one the other way, because according to Craig, we got to put the motion on it to start it. Okay, I'm gonna give him that. Fine, we'll give it the motion, right? We'll give them all a motion. The question is, if I push each one of these different directions, will they all sync back up with the motion of the earth, which they should? And that's my answer to Craig, right? Because right now I'm the one supposed to be answering questions. So for my answer to his Foucault's pendulum folly is that we can't react to Foucault's pendulum experiment on our own by using pendulums such as these. All of these would swing in their own direction. They would never sync up the same direction that the earth is rotating and all that. And we know that. We can do these experiments ourselves. That'll never happen. And the fact that you saying that they got the electrically powered Foucault's pendulum for motion when it should be going off of the motion of the earth rotation is very deceptive. Because what should be making the pendulum move is the earth rotating, like you said, not no electricity or generator and all of that stuff. The reason they gotta use that is because they have to keep on touching the pendulum to restart it every time it stops. So my question, so we know the earth don't stop rotating.
So you're on to your next question, starting round 2. It's on you, bro.
So my next question for round 2.
You got a minute. Go ahead.
Because he didn't deal with this, right? People, for years, these alignments have been taking place, right? You got a Giza in China. You got a Giza in Mexico. You got a Giza in Egypt, people. And these ancient people built these structures based on flat earth. They knew that the ground didn't move. People, you know how a sundial works, right? How a sundial works. They know that the ground don't move, but the sky does. This is how a sundial works. This same observation I'm showing you here. What Craig did not do, he did not deal with this. So my question for him is simple. How are these alignments still taking place today, just like they did during the time of the people that was building this stuff, the generations before us and all that, if we're on a globe Earth? How is that
flying through space?
Okay. How long do I get, sorry, to respond?
A minute.
Right. Oh, okay. So, yeah, measurements of the stars over time shows that the alignment of the stars above the Giza pyramids has actually changed by approximately 12 degrees. You can look up the, the recording of the position of the stars over time. Also, the idea that pyramids of Giza are aligned with certain stars comes from the Orion correlation theory, which was proposed by Robert Bouvel in the 1990s, and there's a lot of controversy around this. It's not even accepted by mainstream academics. Skeptics argue that the correlation is completely coincidental, and it doesn't even happen every year, and it's just a result of selectively choosing data that supports the theory whilst ignoring other data. The fact that the precession of Earth and the measurement of the change in position of the stars shows that they're not in the exact same alignment that they were, kind of debunks that position. The measured change of stars is a thing.
You have a minute, bro?
What the fuck was all that bullshit he just said? That was crazy. His mic too low.
So you've gone quite quiet, bro. I can't hear you.
Oh, thank you guys. My mic was lower. Thank you. So my next question, I'm gonna let you get away with that one, Craig. I can hound you about that one, but I'm not. I'm gonna go ahead and move to my next question. You really ran from that one. Now, I played this video to you, and this angle is damning evidence of a sun that should be 93 million miles away. That sun is close and local, like us flat earthers say, buddy. You got to explain to me, when would there ever be an angle that I can get to on a globe Earth in the sky to look down at the sun that's 93 million miles away and through space or separated from me? When would I ever look down at it if the Earth is a globe and it's 93 million miles away? When will I ever get this shot?
You got 2 minutes, Craig.
Very simple. Let me share my screen 1 sec.
Very simple.
Could you stop sharing, please, bro? Thank you. Okay, so Earth is a globe. Here's the airplane, and then let's say there's like clouds over here, and then it's simple. You've got rays from the sun, which are coming over here. So from the airplane's point of view, you're going to be looking down on the rays that are coming from the sun, which will make it appear as though the sun is below you. Here's the airplane, and there's the clouds. So from the pilot looking down at the clouds, from this position, the sun is going to appear below the position of the plane. We know that pilots do not fly over planes, over the sun. This would be something that would be very, very dangerous, and radar would be able to detect a sun that was below 30,000 feet that the average airline plane flies at. So the suggestion that the sun is below the position of planes is ridiculous. That's something that anybody would be able to confirm for themselves. Seeing the sun below the clouds matches the predictions of the globe. Did you do before? That's it. That's my. I don't need any more time. That explains it. Yeah.
Now we go to Craig. You're asking the question. You got a minute.
Right. Okay. So. Right, so, you haven't responded to anything that I said about the measurements of the Earth using geodetic surveying methods that have been done for centuries by hundreds of teams across the world, including the transcontinental triangulation of the American Arc of the Parallel. Like I explained, they use a network of triangles measured across the surface of the Earth If the Earth was flat, those triangles would all sum to angles of 180. However, as I failed to screen share, but I can show that to you if you like, the measured angles give something called spherical excess, which means every triangle measures over 180 degrees. And when you sum up all the spherical excess, you can actually calculate the radius of the Earth. So my question to you, bro, is how is it possible that we can measure the curve of the Earth matching the radius that we are told if the Earth isn't curved?
Okay, I'm ready. It's gonna be very short and sweet, Jared.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we can't. That's the answer. You claim we did, but you didn't prove it. You told me about an experiment, and unfortunately, you failed to screen share so that we can visually get an understanding of what
he said,
you were
I ain't
saying.
see it.
So what I'll
Would you
do?
like me to pop it up now?
But you know, unless we're gonna give you some more time to explain it when you pop it up, then.
Here's the spherical excess. That column there. That's all you need. That's the measurement.
Wait for your turn.
Yeah.
So all of this data is something that needs to be processed and examined, and that's something that I will do, and that'll be a debate that we'll have to continue. But as of now, I don't have to accept that as fact because you really haven't proven anything other than just said they did it and it proved it, and that's just not how this works. So it just made my job a little easy for that one, honestly, and unfortunately for your screen share thing, that's unfortunate.
Hey, Craig.
Yeah, apologies about the screen share. I clicked the button, but obviously didn't choose the actual screen.
That's cool, but you can go to the next.
Yeah, so it's not just me saying things. This is experiments that have been, measurements that have been repeated time and time and time again. You know, like I said, there's hundreds of teams that have done these measurements countless times across land masses across the entire world. It's not just me saying something, it's something that has been verified and repeated time and time and time again. Anyone that does these measurements using proper geodetic surveying methods finds that there is a spherical excess. The data is all here, and every time that the measurements are done, the same data is found within a margin of error, because obviously all measurements have margins of error. But it shows that it can be repeated, it has been repeated, and just saying you don't believe it doesn't really debunk the fact that here is measurements that people have done. I'd like you to at least try and answer how this is possible if the Earth is flat.
First of all, you lied. My words was never, I don't believe it. In fact, I was honest enough to say that I'm gonna check into it. That's what I said. I said, I'm gonna check into this.
He said you lied.
Process the data and examine it, and then I'm gonna have an argument with you on it. But you did not process the data, which you should have done for your debate. You simply presented an experiment in a way that requires us to go look it up after the debate. You should have did your work. That's all I'm saying. So, thank you for sharing that. You're saying that this experiment proved the shape of the Earth, and I just can't say, well, yep, yes it did. I believe you, Craig. I got to go and examine this experiment, process the data, and look more into it. I'm not dumb enough to speak on something that I didn't look into. And you didn't present enough information today to satisfy me enough to make an argument on it. So guess what? It just don't really help you at all today.
God damn.
You know, this experiment is something I can look into, but I can tell you right now, depending on when they done it, they had limited technology to perform such an experiment of measuring the entire shape of the Earth with what you call in transcontinental triangulation. This is a bunch of mumbo jumbo, but guess what? I can't say that till I look into it. But I can tell you right off the bat, guys, this does not debunks the fact that the surface of water is always level. It doesn't at all. And if it does, he didn't show us how. He didn't show us how. But in my screen shares, I showed how. He's showing a bunch of data for his argument. Well, that data got to be processed and examined. And I will do that. But guess what? You should have done that for us if you showed up prepared for the debate. So we can move to the next one.
You're up next. Bro Sanchez is round 3, so go ahead and you can ask a question. You got a minute.
So now I can ask Craig a question here for a minute. Okay, so I want to know. I got a couple of questions in my minute. First of all, when was this experiment that you speak of done? What year?
The transcontinental triangulation of the American Arc of the Parallel was done.
It's a mouthful.
I can actually get you the dates. 1890, around then.
Okay, got you.
It's a thing that's been repeated many times.
I only got a minute, so be brief. Okay, after 1890, when was the next year that it was repeated?
It's been repeated time and time again.
Give me the next year. You can't just say that.
And unfortunately, I don't have that data available in my head, but there is multiple in the website that I have presented, mctoon.net /r. You can find all the information about multiple experiments.
Okay, so again, he did not show up prepared, guys, because he should have showed up with a list of how many times it was repeated versus just showing up making a claim. Got him.
I do. It's here.
Question for him? Do you have any question you want to?
So my question was for him was that when was the next time that they did this experiment? He can't answer it, so we can move on.
Okay, go ahead. You got a minute, Craig?
Just a minute to respond to that. Yeah. I'm just presenting one that is famous and is known. It's something that's been repeated multiple times. I could, here is a, if I just quickly screen share to make sure I do it. Again, it's not my job to process the data for you. I have personally processed data of all these measurements in the past. I just presented you the measurements today. However, here is a large list of the measurements being done across several different places in the world, not just one. It's many times. It's been done multiple times, different positions on the Earth. I can present hundreds of examples if I want to, but it's irrelevant to the fact that it's been done. Me not knowing the exact date when something was done doesn't disprove anything in the slightest or say that I didn't come prepared when here is all the data available.
Okay, 1 minute, Bro Central.
Okay, all the data he presented was from the same year, the 1800s, in the same time. He the one that said that this thing has been repeated many times, but he's only showing us one time in the 1800s, even on the data sheet he just produced. I didn't make the claim, so you can't make it like I'm doing something wrong here. You made the claim that, there were multiple experiments done, but so far you've only showed one. I'm just gonna make sure that we know that you only showed one, and it ain't my fault that you can't show proof of your claim, and you can't make it my fault. So if I'm not mistaken, I'm the question here. So let me give you a question, another question based on this. I want to exploit this some more. Can you or can you not, for one final time, produce me of any time in the 2000s or 1900s that this experiment was done? You can't give me the date and proof receipts.
You got 2 minutes.
Not often. Just to say, no, not off the top of my head, and that's a completely irrelevant point. Containing a large list of data in my head is irrelevant to the point. I have presented the data, and it was more than just one. I presented a large list, so please stop saying it's one. It's a large list of measurements that have been done multiple times across the world. There's actually been something done in the 1900s. The project undertaken, the leadership of the US Coast Survey measurements taken along the 39th parallel was completed in 1932. There's many more that I could point out, but that's just one of the quick research that I could do. Me not having an entire list of all the measurements ever done is irrelevant to the point that measurements have been done. And frankly, you are running away from the fact that measurements have been done just by going, well, you haven't given me more of them. That's irrelevant and quite a dishonest move on your part.
He's being dishonest.
So, that's it really. I could present hundreds and hundreds of different geodetic surveys around the world. It's something that's been done multiple times throughout the centuries. I know personal geodetic surveyors that have done surveys that I could present that would be in this decade, but that's irrelevant. I don't have to present things from now when I have lots of data from throughout history, and saying that I should is just completely ridiculous and not really how debates work in the slightest. It's not my fault that you can't accept the data that has been presented to you and you just want to run away from actually discussing it.
Okay, we got the last question of round 3. Craig, you're up first. Go ahead. You have a minute to ask whatever you want.
Sorry, what's happening now?
Just another, this is the final one. So you got a question for Bro Sanchez, the final one. You have a minute.
Right, okay. What the things that you talked about. Actually, I want to go back to the Foucault's pendulum when you were talking specifically about the cranes and why don't they do what Foucault's pendulums do? Well, I mean, if the crane was swinging, it would definitely be subject to Coriolis forces. However, there's a lot of wind and stuff. Also, you strawmanned the Foucault's pendulum experiment by saying they should all sync up with the Earth. No, that's not the case. The idea of the Foucault's pendulum experiment is when it's working perfectly, when it is straight and there's no lateral force accidentally applied, you can then measure the Coriolis forces applied to it. So why did you, my question is simple, why did you strawman the Foucault's pendulum experiment and then claim that as victory, saying that it doesn't work?
Okay, according to him, I strawmanned it, guys. My answer to him is I just simply made an observation, and if the Earth is indeed rotating, why can't the pendulums actually reflect the Earth's rotation independently of any outside motion? That's why I made that observation, that if
I can't make that shot no more.
Site, and I was to put all of these pendulums in motion, they would not sync up, right, with the rotation of the Earth. He's maintaining that they would, and that they would also be bound by the Coriolis effect. Well, when you say that they will be affected by the Coriolis, that core, talking about the core of the Earth, we're talking about the Coriolis effect on a globe Earth. And if the pendulums are affected by the Coriolis effect, how are they not affected by the Earth's rotation? And my answer to you is these pendulums should be affected by the Earth rotation. They motion should reflect the Earth rotation. And if that's true, they all would sync up to that one motion in this at this site. So I didn't make a straw man at all. I just made an observation and asked a question.
Yeah, so again, you just strawmanned it once again by making the assumption that they should all sync up. No, that's not what the Coriolis force says should happen. So yes, again, you literally, just in your answer there, strawmanned what the Foucault's pendulum and the Coriolis force says should happen. There's no reason the rotation of the Earth should make them move on their own. The point of the Foucault's pendulum experiment is once a pendulum is swinging, you can measure the Coriolis force applied to the moving bob of the pendulum. So unless you actually address the Foucault's pendulum experiment properly and stop strawmanning it, you haven't debunked it. All you've done is created your own version of the Foucault's pendulum and what it should be and what you say should happen, and tried to debunk that, which is the literal definition of strawmanning something. You can't debunk something by saying it works like this and it should work like this when you're wrong. That is a strawman.
You got 2 minutes to finish it off.
To respond to him. Okay, so Craig, here's why it's not a straw man. I agreed with you. I said, according to the Foucault's pendulum, there's nothing wrong with them starting it with their own hand and force. Okay, I gave you that, even though I disagree with it. I said that, okay, yeah, they have to touch the ball to get it going. It's not, you said no, they shouldn't just set it up and it just start moving according to the Earth rotation. They have to, a force have to act on it, then it will reveal this Coriolis force. I gave you that. I said, okay, let's do it. I'm not gonna argue with you on do we initiate the motion of it ourselves. So therefore, I'm not straw manning it. I'm giving you that. I'm saying if I were to push all of these crane pendulums, I'm giving you that. So I'm not saying that they should just start moving by themselves and all sync up. I'm saying if I touch them all and make them move, at some point they should all sync up with the rotation of the earth if that's what Foucault's pendulum is trying to prove. So I don't see how you still would maintain that I'm straw manning it when I'm giving you the motion. I'm saying, okay, yes, they have, let's say they do have to start them themselves. So if we was in this construction site, those cranes would not be moving. And if I say, well, Craig, prove to me that the earth is rotating, you would set them all in motion, and you would wait up for us to see a certain pattern on this pendulum to prove the Coriolis force or whatever, or the earth's rotation. And that's what's being done with Foucault's pendulum, but you're trying to make it like I'm not maintaining that same thing now with these on this construction site, which I am. It's not a straw man. You just can't make this behave like it should to prove your argument.
Okay, that's the end of that round. Did you want to do a break? We're halfway through. We're right on time. It's up to you.
I'm good to keep going. I just want to say thank you, Journalism. You're doing great as a moderator. I appreciate your unbiased nature when doing this. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that, Jerry. Yeah, we can keep going. I'm just gonna cut my camera off about a minute or two, but we can continue it. Thank you, everybody who are in attendance, for your support.
Yeah, excellent. And now we've got the Crossfire section, which is going to be 10 minutes of just kind of open dialogue. But in round one, Bro's going to be able to open it up so he can just start the conversation whatever direction he wants. In 10 minutes, I'll stop us, and then we'll reset, and Craig will get to kind of introduce a new topic if it gets kind of going crazy. So, Bro Sanchez, you can go ahead and start us off with a 10-minute Crossfire. Try not to talk over each other.
Roger.
Okay, so Crossfire's okay, back and forth. I got you. All right, let's get the screen share back popping for this.
Yeah, how long is this section for? Sorry, I did not to interrupt.
So 10 minutes on this first one, then we'll do 10 minutes with you starting it off after this one.
Okay, brilliant, thank you.
Okay, so earlier Craig was showing us some sun rays, and he was showing us the sun rays through a window, and I wanted to pull that up and deal with that in my in this 10 minutes. So what happens is this, guys. When the sun rays shine through a window or anything, that's what I think that's called a red herring. That's neither here nor there to what we observing. The point is, on a globe Earth, the sun's supposed to illuminate one side of the Earth, a whole side with parallel rays. And that if we go outside and look at the sun rays coming from the sun, we should see parallel rays instead of crepuscular rays, but we see crepuscular rays. If he put you inside of a building and allow the light from outside will actually pour into the building. And my thing is, if depending on what kind of blinds you got, you can also change the direction of those rays with the blinds blocking them and alter them. No different than a hose pipe skeeting water and the water flowing into or an object or something like that. So the thing about him pulling up those sun rays going through the window, those were not directly coming from the sun. That was just the light outside pouring into the window. So, if the light outside is an ocean and a house is in it, then the light is coming in through the window, so to speak. But when we observe the sun directly with our eye as it is in the sky, we should be looking for parallel rays or either crepuscular rays, and we don't need any obstructions in order to make this observation, which is why he shouldn't have had us in a house with the light simply, bleeding in through the window or whatever. Jared, I just wanted to let you know the whole time the clock was not going. I don't know.
Geez.
So I don't know how long I was speaking, but yeah, I'm just trying to be fair. I don't want to.
It's okay. We can just keep going. It's good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I'm happy to just start at 10 minutes now, if that's fine. So my point with the windows, bro, was that, and you even kind of said this yourself. If you change the shades, it'd change what the apparent divergence of those rays coming through the window is. And that's the thing. The rays are created by the shape of the thing that the light is coming from. So the clouds, because there's breaks in the clouds, there's it creates divergent rays. But when you actually change your perspective relative to the position of those corpuscular rays, the apparent position that you could triangulate would be different based on where you're looking at it from. Could I screen share something a second and show you something?
Okay.
Right, so let me bring this up. So we see here the shadows, right, that are coming from the sun, okay? And it's similar to the corpuscular rays, that it looks like it's spread out, right? So would you agree that it's similar, that you would be able to use kind of the angles of these shadows to, point towards where the sun is? Does that match your claim?
I didn't really make such a claim, but I do understand what you're saying here, and I can, I'm tracking.
Right. So, using your logic, you should be able to take the angles of these shadows and triangulate a relative direction that the sun's coming from, right?
I agree.
However, this is my point with corpuscular rays, that it's all to do with perspective, because this is taken from the camera on a drone. And if we go back to the beginning of the video with the drone hovering directly above, what we find is those shadows, they're not actually spread out, they're parallel. And what this shows is that corpuscular rays are simply a result of your position relative to the light breaking through the clouds. You change your position relative to that, the apparent angle of the corpuscular rays will change. Exactly the same as this. From this position, these rays, these shadows created by the rays of the suns in these posts, they look parallel. But when you get down at a different position, they don't look parallel anymore, even though they still are.
They still look parallel to me.
Yeah, exactly.
How can you say that these look parallel? Look at the one on the left, it's pointing towards the left, and the ones on the right are pointing towards the right. So from your perspective, looking at this right now, those shadows aren't parallel to you, right?
Okay, actually, let me examine the picture myself. We're talking about shadows when we should be talking about sun rays. Let me just point that out, right? We're not looking.
I mean, they're the same thing, right?
Wait. In order to prove a globe with a sun that's 93 million miles away, you need to produce for me parallel sun rays like I produce for you crepuscular sun rays. Guess what? Showing me these shadows, you showing me parallel shadows, but I expect parallel shadows. That's expected. So I don't expect parallel sun rays.
Why would you expect parallel shadows?
Because I'm not gonna go into. See, this is what you're doing. You want to have a shadow conversation because you cannot have a sun ray conversation with me and win.
Well, I can, but this isn't the same thing.
I got to get
so the rays from the sun.
You're talking about shadows. I'm talking about sun rays.
Okay, can we agree that
how the two relate?
Okay, bro, can we agree that sun rays create the shadows? The sun rays are hitting those posts, creating those shadows. So if the sun rays are parallel, the shadows will also be parallel.
No. That is
what do you mean?
How
No,
it work. That is not how.
What do you mean?
Works.
How is it not? That's exactly how it works.
But you okay? Let me explain to you why that isn't how it works. The sun rays, the sunlight is what's creating those shadows. We both agree with that. But what we don't agree with though is whether the sun rays are crepuscular or parallel. You're showing me parallel shadows and you saying that because the shadows are parallel, the sun rays are parallel, and I don't know, that's crazy logic.
Yeah, that's exactly. You can't have parallel shadows without parallel sun rays creating those shadows. If the rays of the light were coming from corpuscular rays, like you say, wait, please let me finish, right? If, like you say, the rays of light are coming spread out, which is what we see with the corpuscular rays, okay? Then those spread out rays will cause those shadows to be spread out when you're looking at it from above. They will not be parallel like I showed. But what you see is that even when they look spread out, the same as corpuscular rays look spread out, when viewed from a different position, a different perspective, it shows that they're not spread out, they're actually parallel, and it's actually, in this case, a trick of perspective, which is why when you watch a time lapse of corpuscular rays, you can see that the apparent position changes, right?
Wait a minute. Here's why what you're saying makes no sense. The whole point of us talking about sun rays was trying to answer the question on how far away is the sun. And you're telling me,
we can get to that.
Okay, you're telling me that the sun is 93 million miles away, and that it is indeed making parallel sun rays, but you never really answered to the observations that we show. You went to some shadows and all that stuff. You never really answered
you
to
went
the
to some
fact
shadows and all that stuff.
You never really explained the crepuscular rays that we observe in nature.
I did.
And then you never really did that. If your explanation was the shadows,
I did.
If your explanation was the shadows, then I'm just gonna say that that is not a...
No, the shadows were an example of what would happen if the rays were parallel or spread out. I explained the corpuscular rays exactly, saying that the same as the shadows, the apparent divergence of the corpuscular rays is simply a trick of perspective. I did respond to that. I did say that to you. And we can show this is the case by simply watching a time lapse of corpuscular rays, showing that they don't always triangulate to the same position. So unless the sun is doing crazy up and down, left and right movements all of the time, corpuscular rays cannot triangulate back to the sun because the apparent position of triangulation changes both over time and with position compared to the corpuscular rays.
Dang, missed.
But to answer your question of how do we know the sun's 93 million miles away? Well, that's simple. We've measured the distance to the sun with radar.
Do me a favor, right? Can you show me that demonstration you did about how the pilots was able to look down at the sun? Because what happened, right, I never got to deal with that. In that demonstration, you said that it was the sun rays that were appearing to be under the clouds. You had the sun rays coming from the sun. This is not a sun ray. This is actually the sun itself right here that we're observing.
We don't observe the sun. We observe the light coming from the sun.
Okay, you're not.
That's how seeing works.
You can't see my screen share. Let me show you my screen share.
You're just showing Google. You were just showing a Google page there. Sorry.
Okay, my bad. That's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So that's not a sun ray. That's
my pain.
Wait. I got a question. Is that the actual sun right there under that cloud?
No, it's the light coming from the sun.
So this yellow ball that I see, that's cloaked in these clouds, that's not the sun. That's the light coming from the sun.
He's like, what?
Well, no, yes, we don't see things, we see the light coming from things. That's how seeing works.
Okay, so this is just bananas what you're saying, because what we're looking at right there.
Do you disagree that's how you see things?
Wait. Nah, you're moving the goalpost. Listen up. The sun is in the direct area that we see it on this video because the clouds surrounding it ain't lit up. If we go back over here, those clouds that's not near the sun, they're more darker because it's lighting up the thing locally. It's literally the source of the light is right here cloaked in the clouds. That is not the light of the sun. That is the sun that we see in this image. I don't understand how you can say that this yellow ball we looking at right
you see the light, you don't see things.
So
I mean, that's just, with all due respect, bro, that's just how seeing works. You see the light that comes from things. You don't see things.
Hold up, wait a minute.
Let me finish.
Wait, it's my 10 minutes. You're making two different arguments.
No, it's ours.
I'm not talking about how I see. I'm talking about what I'm seeing right here. It's the source of the light that you're speaking of, and I shouldn't be saying the source.
No, you're seeing the light coming from it.
That's the source of the light. That's not the light coming from it.
You're still looking at this. You're still looking at the sun and seeing the light coming from the sun, exactly as my diagram earlier showed.
So this is not the sun. One more time for the record. This is not the sun.
He getting angry.
It's the light coming from the sun because that's how seeing works.
We got it.
Yeah. So and you kind of avoided my question, which was how are we able to measure it with radar?
Sorry.
What is that?
What the fuck is going on
That's
now?
the wrong clock sounded.
Sorry.
All right, so we got another 10 minutes, going to reset that, and now Craig, you get to kind of take us in whatever direction you want. You can continue on this line of talk, or you can completely go.
Yeah. Well, I just want to finish that bit quickly, and then I've got another thing to talk about. So, so you can say, seeing things like this all you want, but the simple answer to it is that we can use a known working technology called radar to measure the distance to the sun.
Call our eyes.
Why are you talking over me like that?
Back and forth around. But go ahead.
Well, I was in the middle of talking, and then you just started saying random things. So again, we can use known technology called radar to actually measure the distance to the sun. We don't need to rely on our eyes. We can use known working technology. And it's been done. It has been measured with radar. I could present a paper from the 1960s where they actually used ground-based radar to measure the distance to the sun and get a ping back, and it was 93 million miles. So my question to you is, how are we able to use radar to measure the distance to the sun as 93 million miles if the distance to the sun is not 93 million miles?
Okay, so he said in the 60s, right? They measured using radar the distance of 93 million miles. The longest radar that we had during the 60s was between 30 and 50 miles. That this was what was on warcraft aircraft. People, if you think that we had,
could you provide a citation for that, please?
Wait a minute. We can go to the history of radar here. All we got to look up is the longest radar detection
transmission detection
in the the 60s is what you said. I think the 60s. That's all we got to do. And guess what? Show me anywhere in the 60s where they made a radar detection of 93 million miles with the technology they had in the 60s. Show me where show me where they doing that today too, for that matter. They not even doing that today.
Well, I'm presenting the paper right now that they used the technology. Again, this is the paper. No, it's not he said, she say. It is a scientific paper documented, of a scientific experiment. If you want to ignore scientific documentation, then that's your prerogative, but it kind of means that you're just going to ignore science. This is something that can be repeated if you want to go ahead and do that, but it is a documented scientific experiment that in 1961 they measured using radar, and they've got all the calculations and the type of radar and everything here, and measured the distance to the sun of 93 million miles. You just wait one sec. You just saying radar couldn't go that far. It is just a claim when I have a scientific paper talking about the technology that they used for radar to go that far.
Okay, fair enough. I got a question. Can you tell me the name and type of radar they use and its specifications so we can actually see was it able to detect something for 93 million miles? We want to see the numbers. I want to see so I can look up its capabilities in other radars at that time, their capabilities as well. And we want to know, was there anyone in the 60s building radar that could detect out that far?
93 million miles.
The people that did this experiment,
Cool. Can you show me, can we get into the specifications at all?
So briefly, one radar experiment is performed by transmitting a coded signal to the sun for 16 minutes. The round trip time and then receiving the echo for the following 16 minutes. The average transmitted power is 500 kilowatts and the antenna gain is 33 to 36 decibels relative to isotropic. There is the particular specifications. My question to you is, what is your knowledge and qualifications in radar technology to be able to analyze that data?
Oh, so you don't have any qualifications yourself? I mean, the purpose.
No, I do. I actually do. I've worked with radar in the military.
You asked the question. I work
with
radar
in the military
too as well. So check this out. Let me answer your question, right? What I do know about me using radar is that it has limitations, and that the best radar can detect out the furthest. You get a longer detection bubble, and that's going to cost you more money though.
Detection bubble? That's not how radar works.
Okay, what I'm telling you, know exactly what I'm talking about. We're not going to play a semantic game. You don't want to have see, this is what's going on. You don't want to really have the conversation of the technology using in the 60s.
No, I just gave you the technology with the specifics of the technology, and you're telling me I didn't give you that that specific. Why are you doing that? Why are you literally lying about the thing that I just
so
did?
here's
That's
what I'm
not
saying.
very honest.
Okay, what you gave me doesn't prove that that radar was capable of detecting something 93 million miles away.
That's the exact power and everything that needed to do it. Yeah, there's no reason why those specifications would not be able to do it. That's powerful enough to be able to do it.
I got
radar,
a question.
Radar is an electromagnetic signal that's a self-propagating wave. There's nothing to stop it in space. They were able to detect the signal back. I gave you the specifics of the technology. You can do the maths around those specifics and show that it would be capable of doing that if you like.
Okay,
by the way, you can.
That's something you globalists should have been did. But nevertheless, though, I'll say this.
I've done that.
If anybody can do this that's watching the debate, you can research on your own the capabilities of radar technology in the 60s. And I'm gonna tell you, if what he's giving us is true, then guess what, y'all? That was the best radar even up to today. Because we got radars we're making in 2022, 2023 that can't detect something 93 million miles away. And the reason that these radars can detect the sun, because it's not 93 million miles away.
Well, except the measurements from the radar shows that it is, of course. I mean, all you're doing is going, you don't think that technology exists when I just presented you a paper with the specificity of the technology. And you can't just say, it doesn't exist when it's there. They did it and they measured the distance to the...
All right, y'all, I'm finna hop out for a minute now. I'll holler at y'all motherfuckers later, though. Peace.